Faith and Mental Power. In the volume of this series entitled Personal Power, and in several other volumes of the same series, we have repeatedly called the attention of our readers to the fact that the powers and energies of the mind are called forth under the influence of those mental activities known respectively as 1. Ideation, 2. Desire, and 3. Will. First, there must be present in the mind a strong, clear, definite idea and mental picture of the object toward which the mental energies and powers are to be directed and applied. Second, there must be present in the mind a strong, insistent, burning desire, longing and craving for the attainment of the object toward which the mental energies and powers are to be directed and applied. Third, there must be present in the mind a strong, determined, and persistent will that there shall be attained that object toward which the mental energies and powers are to be directed. These three mental factors operate in the direction of arousing and maintaining in action the mental powers and energies necessary for the accomplishment of the particular work required for the attainment of the object of attention, desire and will. If any of the three be but weakly manifested, or faith power practically absent, then there will be a corresponding weakness in the action of the mental powers and energies. In effective mental action there must always be the clear, definite idea of that which is sought after, the ardent, insistent desire for it, and the strong, persistent will for its attainment. Underlying these three there must always be that strong, lively, unfailing faith which serves as the base and foundation of the entire structure. Not only does faith serve as the base and foundation of the mental structure just mentioned, but its influence must also ascend to and permeate that which rests upon it. Faith not only supports and sustains, but it likewise correlates and coordinates the three mental factors, and also animates, energizes, stimulates and inspires them. When we examine the matter closely we perceive this action and influence of faith upon each of the three aforesaid mental factors involved in all successful activities and performances of the mind of man. Without the presence and action of faith there is a weakening and deadening of ideation, of desire, and of will. Quickened faith increases the efficiency of each and every one of these three mental factors, in their individual or their coordinated existence. Let us now consider in a little closer detail the action and influence of faith upon these three several mental factors involved in the successful manifestation of mental power. Faith in idealization. In this instruction the term idealization is employed in the sense of the act of creating the ideal, mental, form, pattern, design or mold of that which you desire to materialize in objective reality. In the volume of this series entitled Personal Power, we present the idea of idealization as follows: ideals, clearly defined in outline and sharply defined in configuration, well energized and vitalized by an inflow of will power, tend to materialize themselves in objective reality, by means of a. Building up a corresponding ethereal pattern, outline, design or mold, around which is deposited the substance of materialization, and b. By means of attracting to itself the persons, conditions, things, and environmental factors which aid in the process of materialization. Materialization is the act or process of investing with material form, or material properties, that which has previously existed in idealized form or condition. In the same volume are given the following suggestions concerning the materializing of the ideal form, the form in the seed, which you desire to manifest in the form of plant, flower and fruit. 1. Idealize the desired things, happenings, or conditions just exactly as if they were existent and active at that particular moment, right here and now, before you. 2. Idealize yourself as you wish to be or to do. 3. Idealize others as you wish them to be or to do. 4. Idealize happenings as you wish them to occur. 5. Idealize conditions as you wish them to be. 6. Idealize environment as you wish it to be. 7. Idealize your power, strength or ability as you wish them to be. It is of paramount importance in all cases in which you wish to accomplish something by the power of your mind, whether along exoteric or esoteric lines of activity, that you should first create in your mind a clear, strong, definite idea, ideal, or mental picture of the thing or condition which you wish to create or bring into material form in the objective world. The importance of this creation of a clear, strong, definite idea or ideal of that which you wish to attain, accomplish, or gain possession of, cannot easily be overestimated. From the simplest task to the greatest achievement, the materialization is rendered far easier of accomplishment, and far more effective in its results, by reason of the previous existence of a strong, clear, definite mental idea, ideal or form. The ideal form must always precede the material form. We shall not extend our consideration of idealization in this place, for it has been covered fully in other volumes of this series. Our purpose here is merely that of pointing out to you the fact that it is most difficult, if not indeed actually impossible, to practice idealization effectively unless there first exists in your mind a firm, earnest, steadfast faith concerning the possibility of the accomplishment, or of the bringing to pass of the desired thing or condition. Faith so directed clears the path of the idealizing activities, it removes all obstacles and hindrances to their action, it enables the mind to form clearly the idea or mental image, and to endow the same with the appearance of reality. Doubt, distrust, or feeble faith, on the contrary, interfere with the process of idealization, and renders the ideal or mental picture hazy, indefinite and indistinct. Unfaith, or faith extended in the opposite direction, tend to distort the ideal form, if not, indeed, to cause it to take on the form of the opposite to that which is desired. Feeble faith, or distrust and doubt, and still more, unfaith or wrongly directed faith, cause you to feel that all effort toward attainment is futile, useless, and not worthwhile. They cause the poison of "I can't" to enter the mind, and the battle is lost before it is begun. The creative imagination and the ideative faculties refuse to create strong, dear definite ideas or ideals of that which they feel can never be accomplished or gained. On the contrary, when you feel that there is a strong probability or chance of the successful accomplishment or attainment, when confident expectation manifests itself, when the "I can and I will" spirit asserts itself within you, then your mind eagerly performs the work of idealization, and your creative imagination vividly pictures the mental forms which you desire to manifest in material, objective form and effect. So, right here in the first stage of the manifestation of personal power, in the stage of idealization, you are confronted with the necessity of developing and maintaining faith and confident expectation, and with the necessity of inhibiting doubt, disbelief, distrust, unfaith or faith wrongly directed. Before you can materialize that which you wish, you must first know exactly what you wish, must know it in clear ideal form, the more definite and clearer the better. Faith aids in this idealization, while doubt, disbelief, distrust, unfaith or faith wrongly directed, will tend to paralyze your ideative powers by means of the insidious introduction of the feeling of "what's the use? It can't be done, I don't believe it, it is impossible," these, in themselves, being ideas, ideals or mental pictures opposed to the accomplishment or attainment of the desired thing, and which, like all other ideals, will strive to become real, and to take on material, objective form. Here is the principle in concise form: faith encourages and promotes effective idealization, doubt, unfaith, distrust and disbelief retard and render ineffective the process of idealization. Faith in desire. Desire is the second factor of mental power. You must not only know definitely exactly what you want, and manifest it by means of idealization, you must also want it hard enough, and manifest it in insistent desire. Desire is the flame and fire which create the steam of will. The will never goes out into effective action except when drawn forth by active and sufficiently strong desire. Desire furnishes the motive for will never becomes active in absence of a motive. When we speak of a man having a strong will, we often mean really that he has strong desire strong enough to cause him to exert every ounce of power and energy in him toward the attainment or accomplishment of the object of desire. Desire exerts a tremendous influence upon all of the mental faculties, causing them to put forth their full energies and powers and to perform their work efficiently. It stimulates the intellect, inspires the emotions and quickens the imagination. Without the urge of desire there would be but little mental work performed. The keynote of desire is, I want, and to gratify and satisfy that want, the mind puts forth its best energies. Without desire, you would do but little thinking, for there would be no motive for such. Without desire you would perform no actions, for there would be no moving reason for such. Desire is ever the mover to action mental as well as physical. Moreover, the degree and the intensity of your work, mental or physical, is determined by the degree of desire manifested in you concerning the object or end of such work. The more you want a thing, the harder will you work for it, and the easier will such work seem to you to be. The task performed under the influence and incentive of strong desire will seem much easier than would the same task performed without such influence and incentive, and infinitely easier than would the same task appear if its end and object were contrary to your desire. No argument is needed to establish these facts, they are matters of common knowledge, and are proved by the experience of everyday life. In the volume of this series entitled Desire Power, we have given our readers the following general rule concerning the effects of desire upon actions and performance of work, and consequently upon the attainment and accomplishment of one's ideals. The degree of force, energy, will, determination, persistence and continuous application manifested by an individual in his aspirations, ambitions, aims, performances, actions and work, is determined primarily by the degree of his desire for the attainment of these objects, his degree of want and want-to concerning that object. So true is this principle that some who have studied its effects have announced the aphorism, you can have or be anything you want, if you only want it hard enough. We shall not go into a detailed consideration of the effect and force of desire at this place, we have considered it in other volumes of this series. Our purpose here is merely that of calling to your attention the important fact that without faith it is practically impossible for you to manifest strong, ardent, insistent desire. If you are filled with doubt, distrust, unfaith or disbelief in a thing, or concerning the successful accomplishment or attainment of anything, you will not be able to arouse the proper degree of desire for that thing or for its accomplishment and attainment. Lack of faith, or, still more, positive disbelief, tends to paralyze the desire power, it acts as a brake or as a damper upon its power. Faith, on the contrary, frees the brakes of desire, or turns on the full draft of its fire. Desire, in order to be efficient, must be insistent, urgent, imperative, refusing to be denied. It must be that eager longing, craving, seeking, striving which will not rest content unless satisfied or gratified. It must be, as we have repeatedly stated in the various volumes of this series, the same kind of craving and fierce demand that is capable of arousing a want or want equal to that of the drowning man's desire for air, the desert-lost man's desire for water, the starving man's desire for food, the mother animal's desire for the welfare of her offspring, and the wild creature's desire for its mate. Such a degree and intensity of desire is practically impossible without the existence of a strong, earnest faith, and a high degree of confident expectation. Here is the principle in concise form: faith encourages and sustains, promotes and maintains desire in its highest degree of efficiency. Doubt, disbelief, distrust and unfaith retard and restrict, inhibit and paralyze this efficient manifestation of desire. Faith in will action. Will action is the third factor of mental power. You must not only know clearly just what you want, and see it in your mind's eye, in ideal form, you must not only want it hard enough, and arouse its power to a degree of insistence and demand which will not brook denial or defeat, you must also call into service the persistent, determined, indomitable application of the will, which will hold your energies and powers steadfastly and relentlessly to the task of accomplishment and attainment. You must will to will, and must make your will itself in the act of willing. Will is perhaps the most mysterious of all of the mental powers. It seems to dwell on a mental plane alone by itself. It lies nearer and closer to the I am I or ego than does any other phase of mentality. It is the principal instrument of the I am I, the instrument which the latter employs directly and immediately. Its spirit is persistent determination, its essence is action. Whenever you act, then do you employ your will. Willpower is the dynamic phase or aspect of mental power. All other mental force is more or less static. It is only when the will becomes involved in the process that mental power manifests its dynamic phase or aspect. Wise men have held that all power is will power at the last, and that all activities are forms or phases of will action at the last. In the cosmos, as well as in the individual, will power is the essential and basic phase of power. While it is true that will goes out only in response to desire, consciously or unconsciously present and active, and while it is likewise true that will always moves toward an idea previously existent in the mind, it is also true that will is greatly encouraged in action and in efficiency by the presence and power of an earnest faith or confident expectation, and that its action is retarded, restricted, weakened, or perhaps absolutely inhibited by an absence of faith, or by the presence of unfaith, doubt, distrust or disbelief. You may satisfy yourself concerning the influence of faith upon the will by means of the consideration of a few simple hypothetical cases. For instance, you may be admiring a distant star, and speculating concerning its scenes and possible inhabitants. You feel a strong desire to know something about that distant object. You feel that you would like to travel through space until you reach its scenes, or that you would like to reach out and draw it toward you that you might inspect it. Yet you make no move toward flying through space, nor do you extend your hand, like the infant reaching for the moon, and attempt to grasp it. Why not? Of course, simply because you have no faith that such attempts would be successful, you manifest positive doubt, distrust and disbelief concerning the idea, and your will is not called into action concerning it. Upon the same principle, though the case is not such an extreme one, your will does not move into action concerning many other familiar objects, being inhibited by your positive disbelief concerning the possibilities of its accomplishment. Again, if you have only a faint degree of confident expectation of the possible or probable outcome of an undertaking, then your will moves but feebly toward action concerning that undertaking. If you feel that the chances are all against me, or that I haven't a chance in the world of doing this, then your will is practically paralyzed so far as is concerned any action directed toward the accomplishment of that thing. In the degree that you doubt or disbelieve in the efficacy of an action, so will be the degree of the weakening, restriction or inhibition of your will action concerning that thing. The converse of the above proposition is likewise true. In the degree that you have faith in an undertaking or course of action, and in the degree of your confident expectation of the successful result of action in that direction, so will be the degree of the ease, efficiency and force of your will action in that direction. The greater your faith and your confident expectation, the greater will be the ease and efficiency of your manifestation of will action concerning the object of your faith and expectant attention. Here is the principle in concise form: faith encourages and stimulates will action and persistent determination, doubt, distrust, disbelief and unfaith restrain, restrict, retard and inhibit will action and persistent determination. Faith in combined idea desire will. From the foregoing, you will realize that in order to manifest your mental power to its full degree of efficiency, or even to an approximate degree of effectiveness, it is necessary that you should experience and entertain at least a very considerable amount of faith, and a lively degree of confident expectation concerning the object, subject, achievement or attainment toward which your mental power is to be directed. If you have not this degree of faith and confident expectation, you cannot expect to be able to manifest an effective degree of mental power in the case. In the event of finding yourself in such a position, you must either strive to arouse, develop and cultivate a true faith and a rational confident expectation concerning the object of your endeavors, or else, b. to withdraw from the attempt because you fail to find a rational and valid basis for such faith and confident expectation. To continue the attempt without faith, and without at least a very fair degree of confident expectation, is to violate the essential laws of your own mental and spiritual being. However, as we have pointed out to you before, it is not proper to withdraw from a task or a pursuit or undertaking because of lack of faith and confident expectation, until you have thoroughly examined the matter in the light of reason free from prejudice, nor until you have satisfied yourself that there is no valid and true basis for faith in the thing in question. However, the fact remains undisputed that without faith and confident expectation your mental power will refuse to manifest itself actively and efficiently. Your heart must be in the undertaking or task, or your head will not do its best work therein, and your hands will follow the lead of the head. Efficiency comes from the exercise of head, heart and hands. The attractive power of faith. In addition to the influence exerted by faith over and upon those phases of mental power which manifest in the more familiar activities of thought, desire, and will, which you have considered in the preceding section of this book, faith also plays an important part in those less familiar activities of the mind which operate in the direction of affecting and influencing the things, conditions and persons in the outside world. This is particularly true concerning that phase or form of mental power which manifests along the lines of the law of mental attraction. While the orthodox and more formal schools of psychology do not as yet openly admit the validity of the phenomena of mental power to which we have just referred, nevertheless there exists a large and rapidly growing body of careful thinkers, experimenters, and observers who have thoroughly satisfied themselves of the reality of such phenomena, and of the validity of the teachings concerning the mental laws governing them. That thought travels in subtle waves, currents, and streams of vibratory energy which extend far from the brain of the persons originating them, that these vibratory thought waves or thought currents affect and influence other persons and things, that thought is contagious and awakens corresponding mental vibrations in others at a distance. All this has now come to be accepted as truth by millions of persons all over the world, and though not as yet formally accepted and taught by the orthodox conservative schools of psychology, the general hypothesis is accepted as true by great numbers of very careful thinkers, and the body of experimental and practical proof supporting it is increasing rapidly in size and importance. One of the most interesting, and at the same time most important and practical phases of this general class of mental phenomena is that which is known as mental attraction, or thought attraction, the attractive power of thought manifesting along the lines of the law of mental attraction. It is with this particular phase that we are specially concerned in this consideration, rather than that of thought power in general. We have considered the general subject of thought power, thought vibration, etc., in that volume of this series entitled Thought Power. In the present volume we are concerned with thought power only so far as it is associated with faith power, and the attractive power of thought is closely linked with that of faith power, as you will see as we proceed with the present consideration of the subject. The attractive power of thought, manifesting along the lines of the law of mental attraction, may be stated as follows. 1. Thought, in the form of subtle vibratory force, travels in constantly widening circles from the center represented by the brain of the individual. 2. These thought waves coming in contact with the minds of other persons tend to set up corresponding vibrations there, manifesting what has been called the contagion of thought. 3. These thought vibrations of the individual manifest that general law of thought by reason of which thought continually strives, a. to manifest itself in action, and b. to materialize in objective form that which exists within itself in ideal form. 4. These thought vibrations operating as above stated, tend to attract and draw to the individual the objects and conditions of the outside world which are correlated to the thought of the individual, or else to attract and draw the individual to such correlated objects or conditions. The attractive power of thought, sometimes called the drawing power of the mind, operates along the lines of what is known as the law of mental attraction, as we have said. This law of mental attraction operates along certain general lines of manifestation, though exhibiting numerous special phases or forms of such manifestation. Its general principle of operation is well expressed by the term correlation. Correlation means reciprocal or mutual relation, and relation meaning connection, kinship, alliance, attachment or affinity. Correlation, then, means mutual or reciprocal relation, connection, kinship, alliance, attachment or affinity. Things which are correlated are tied or linked together by mutual affinity, kinship, alliance or similar connection. One of the cardinal principles of mental science is that thoughts and the things represented by them are correlated, i.e., linked and connected by subtle ties or bonds of attachment, affinity, or kinship. The second principle of mental science is that correlated things tend to attract each other, thus the things of the outside world tend to attract the thoughts which are correlated to them, and the thoughts tend to attract the things to which they are correlated. Thus there is set up a process of mutual attraction or drawing to, things attracting and drawing to themselves correlated thoughts, and thoughts attracting and drawing to themselves correlated things, conditions, happenings, or persons. The same mental law also operates so as to draw to the individual the thought currents of others which are correlated to his own by reason of similar rate of vibrations, or of common nature of the thought. Thought attraction has been compared with the action of the magnet, and, indeed, the mind is a powerful magnet attracting and drawing to itself those things which are in harmonious vibration with it. It has also been compared to the action of gravitation, and the analogy is quite striking. The law of mental attraction might well be called the law of mental gravitation. Gravitation is that attraction or force by which all bodies or particles in the universe tend toward each other. Not only does the earth attract the tiny particle of matter, but the latter also attracts the earth. Not only does the sun attract the earth, but the latter also attracts the sun. Not only does the earth attract the moon, but the latter also attracts the earth, as is evidenced by its pulling force upon the earth's tides. There is the mutual and reciprocal pull of gravitation in force between all material things. The law of mental attraction, or mental gravitation, acts along lines very similar to those of the action of physical gravitation. There is present and active the mutual and reciprocal pull between thoughts and things, and between thoughts and thoughts. Thoughts, however, are things at the last analysis. This principle extends even to so-called inanimate objects. This mystery is explainable under the now well-established law that there is mind in everything, even in the apparently inanimate objects of the universe, even in the atoms and particles of which material substances are composed. We shall not argue this last point here. It has been considered in detail in other volumes of this series. We are stating here merely the general fact. Just as birds of a feather flock together, so do the thought waves and thought currents of different individuals draw together, and also are attracted to the different individuals manifesting the same general character of thoughts. There are affinities in the world of thought vibrations, just as there are affinities between chemical substances and between individual living creatures. We not only draw to us thought vibrations in harmony with our own, but we also draw to ourselves other persons whose general thought vibrations are similar to our own. The negative phase of attraction, that phase known as repulsion, operates along the same general lines as the positive phase. The following lines, quoted from that volume of the present series, entitled Thought Power, will give you in short form a general idea of the more complex operations of the law of mental attraction. Not only do you attract thought vibrations, thought waves, thought currents, thought atmospheres, etc., of a harmonious character, and to which your thoughts have a natural affinity, you also attract to yourselves, by the power of thought attraction, other persons whose thoughts have an affinity and harmony with your own. In the same way you attract to yourself, and are attracted toward, other persons whose interests run along the same general lines as your own. You draw to yourself the persons who may be necessary for the successful carrying out of the plans and purposes, the desires and ambitions, which fill your thoughts most of the time, and, in the same way, you are drawn toward those into whose plans and purposes you are fitted to play an important part. In short, each person tends to attract toward himself those other persons whom he needs in order to materialize his ideals and to express his desires, providing that he wants hard enough and providing that the other persons are in harmonious affinity with his plans and purposes. There are other, and still more subtle, phases of the operation of thought attraction which must be noted here, although they involve the operation of certain powers of the mind, and of nature, which are but little understood by the great masses of persons. We have reference here to the fact that by thought attraction not only other thoughts, not only other persons, are attracted to oneself, but also that the conditions, environment and circumstances necessary for the effective expression and manifestation of one's thoughts are often brought into being for him. They can scarcely be said to have been attracted to him, rather does it seem that he is attracted to and by them. There is evidently a correlation established between these things and one's thoughts. Subtle natural forces are called into operation in order that there may be a coordination of the person, the time, the place, the conditions, the opportunity, required for the expression and materialization of the thought. Persons who have had their attention directed toward the operations of the law of mental attraction, and who have learned to apply the principles of its manifestation in their own affairs in life, observe many wonderful instances of its power in the happenings of their everyday life. Books, newspaper items, magazine articles bearing on some subject which is prominent in their thoughts, all these come to hand in an almost uncanny way. Persons who fit into the general scheme of the thought plan come into one's life. Peculiar happenings come to pass in the same way. Things arise which fit in with the general idea. Unexpected circumstances arise which, although often at first sight seemingly obstructive and undesirable, in the end are found to dovetail perfectly into the whole scheme of things. No wonder that many persons having these experiences are at first inclined to attribute them to supernatural or superhuman influence, but they are in full accordance with natural law, and are a part of the powers of man, when rightly understood. It is undoubtedly true that clear idealization and insistent desire, combined with the persistent determination of will, give power, energy, and force to the attractive power of thought in the cases just recited. Thoughts characterized by strong, clear-cut ideas and ideals, inspired by insistent desire, and stiffened by persistent will, are far more effective in thought attraction than are thoughts of the opposite character. But the factor of faith or confident expectation plays an equally important part in the process. Here, as in every other manifestation of mental power, or personal power of any kind, the factor of confident expectation is most important, and one which must always be pressed into service and never overlooked or undervalued. As we have repeatedly stated in this book, faith and confident expectation is the great stimulator and energizer of mental power, and doubt, disbelief, distrust and unbelief are the great weakeners, depressants, and inhibiting forces of the mind. The attractive power of thought is highly increased by the presence of a lively faith and spirited confident expectation. It is greatly decreased, weakened, hampered and often almost entirely inhibited by the presence of marked doubt, disbelief, distrust and unbelief. The general law concerning faith and confident expectation is as fully and actively operative in the phenomena of thought attraction as in any of the other phases of mental power. When your thoughts concerning an object, a plan, an undertaking, a course of action, is strongly colored by faith and confident expectation, they are given an active, forceful attractive quality. They may be said to be inspired by that confident, expectant, hopeful mental attitude, and are accordingly filled with life and spirit. On the contrary, when your thoughts of this nature are colored with doubt, distrust, disbelief and unfaith, they lack life and spirit, and are weak and ineffective. When that unfaith is of such a pronounced character as to be actually a faith in the futility of the plan, and a confident expectation of its ultimate failure, then the thoughts, strong enough to produce effects and results, tend to attract the opposite of that desired, in short, to attract the undesirable results instead of the desirable effects. You may understand this better by realizing that the effect of transmitted thought vibrations is almost precisely similar to the effect of one's mental attitude manifested in a personal interview. You need no argument, no illustrations, to convince you of the different effect produced upon you, and in you, on the one hand, by the confident, hopeful, expectant, optimistic mental attitude of the person seeking to interest you in a plan or an undertaking, and on the other hand, by that of the person with a similar purpose whose mind is filled with doubt, distrust, unfaith and disbelief in the thing which he is presenting to your attention and which he is advocating. In such instances, you fairly catch the mental vibrations of either of these classes of persons, and you are distinctly aware of the mental reaction which they induce in you. The first class produces an effect which may be called inspiring, the second class, an effect which may be called dispiriting. The one class invites success and cooperation, the other class invites failure and a refusal on your part to fall in with the idea presented. In either case, the effect produced upon you is correlated with the character of the thoughts prominent in the mind of the other person. Some persons, in such an interview, are so filled with faith, hope, confidence, and belief in their plans and propositions, and in the successful outcome of the interview, that it requires an effort on your part to refuse this to them. Others, under similar conditions, manifest merely a lukewarm and colorless mental attitude. They seem to lack conviction concerning the merits of their proposition, and to entertain grave doubts of their ability to attract and hold your attention and interest, let alone to arouse your desire and to obtain a judgment in their favor. It is quite easy to say no to such persons, for you are convinced that they feel, in their hearts, that such is just what I expected. Others have such a degree of doubt, unfaith, disbelief and lack of confidence in the proposition, and in the outcome of the interview, that it amounts to faith and confident expectation of being turned down cold at once. Their mental ears are pricked ready to catch your emphatic no. Here you find refusal to be the line of the least resistance. You know this from actual experience. Well, then, this same principle operates in the case of thought attraction by means of the transmitted thought vibrations of the individual. There are present in such case the conditions which attract and those which repel. The thought vibrations of the individual are really that individual himself, so far as is concerned the particular degree of thought attraction. They produce the same effect at long range that are produced at short range in the personal interview. The principle is the same in either case. Your mental attitude and the character of your thoughts determine the effect to be produced in the long-distance mental calls, just as truly as in the short-distance ones. The same causes are present and active, and, of course, the same effects and results follow. Wherever mental power is present and active, it acts according to the same principles, irrespective of the distance from the person exercising it. Space does not change its character or its laws of operation. This being understood, you will see that it is not sufficient for you to arouse your faith and confident expectation concerning an undertaking, project, plan, idea, object or subject merely when you are actually in the presence of persons who are considered likely to serve your purposes in the matter. You must also create and maintain a habitual mental attitude of faith, belief and confident expectation in the things in which you are interested, and in which you hope to interest others. You must not allow doubt, distrust, disbelief and unfaith to overcome you during the hours in which you are away from the other persons in the case. And, above all, you must never allow yourself to fall into the slough of despond, into the mire of positive doubt, distrust and disbelief concerning your projects, lest you start into operation, in the wrong direction, the power of faith and confident expectation. Your mental atmosphere is not confined to your immediate position in space. It extends in all directions, and is filled with vibrations, waves, currents, whirlpools and swirlpools of thought power, and these influence and produce effects upon other persons whose thoughts are turned upon similar objects, or upon yourself and your undertakings. Remember, always, that thought is contagious, at long range as well as at short range, over long distances as well as in your immediate vicinity. If you have a lively faith in your undertakings, and a firmly established confident expectation of their success, then others in the general line of interest will tend to catch this mental attitude. Just as true is it that if you entertain marked doubt toward your proposition or undertaking, if you are filled with distrust, disbelief and unfaith regarding it, then such other persons will tend to catch these mental vibrations, and will act accordingly. First, be sure that the undertaking is a proper subject or object of faith and confident expectation, and then deliberately and determinately cultivate, develop and maintain such mental attitude concerning it, until it becomes set and habitual. If you cannot do this, you will do well to drop your connection with the thing, and to turn your attention to something toward which, and concerning which, you truly feel faith and confident expectation, and are able to manifest the proper mental attitude toward it. The more complex phases and forms of the manifestation of thought attraction, namely, those phases and forms which are concerned with the attraction of circumstances, happenings, conditions and environments, while more difficult to explain satisfactorily in simple terms, nevertheless are governed by the same general underlying principles of the law of mental attraction. The mental forces are set into activity by desire, they move out toward the object of clear and strong idealization, they are held firmly to the task by will, and, last but not least, they are largely dependent upon faith and confident expectation for their color and effectiveness. Your conditions and environment, the circumstances and happenings which come to you, are very largely the result of the operation of the law of mental attraction, and they are accordingly, to a great extent, manifestations in objective, material form of your mental ideas, ideals and pictures. The force and nature of such manifestation depending largely upon the degree of faith and confident expectation possessed and expressed by you in your thought upon these subjects and events, or upon the degree of doubt, disbelief, distrust and unfaith, those negative phases of faith which serve to slow down the action of faith power, or perhaps even to reverse its machinery. You create environment, conditions, circumstances, events, assistance, means to ends, by mental power operating along the lines of the law of mental attraction. Mental attraction, like all forms or phases of mental power, is the transformation of the subjective ideal into objective reality. The thought tends to take form in action, the mental form tends to take on objective materiality and substance. The ideal is represented by the clear, strong, definite mental picture or ideal form manifested in idealization. Desire furnishes the flame and heat which generate the steam of will needed in the creative process, but the idealization is impaired and weakened, the desire dies away, the will loses its determination, unless faith be there to create the confident expectation. The less the faith and confident expectation, or the greater the doubt, disbelief, distrust, unfaith and lack of confidence, the weaker is the idealization, the weaker the desire, and the weaker the will power manifested. Without faith, there can be no confident expectation, without faith, the fires of desire die away, without faith, the steam of will ceases to be generated, and thus attainment becomes impossible. Whenever you think of the law of mental attraction, think of faith, for faith is its very soul, its inspiration. Faith in yourself. In the foregoing sections of this book we have asked you to consider the subject of the importance of developing and maintaining faith in the subjects and objects, the undertakings and propositions, which constitute the basis of your endeavors and work, and also that of the confident expectation concerning the successful outcome of your endeavors in their behalf, when these actually have been undertaken. In the present section we ask you to develop, maintain and manifest faith in yourself and confident expectation concerning the outcome of your expression of personal power, in thought, will, and work. Important as is the maintenance of the confident, expectant mental attitude toward the objects and subjects of your endeavors, and toward their successful outcome, even still more important is the intelligent, intuitive mental attitude of faith and confident expectation concerning yourself, your possession of personal power, and your ability to manifest efficiently your latent, innate powers and energies in actual objective performance. You, the individual, are the base and ground, the coordinator and correlator of your active forces and energies, and the creator of the world which constitutes your environment, and you are the proper subject of the manifestation of your earnest faith and your most certain confident expectation. Among the many characteristics and qualities which make for success of the individual there is none more fundamental, essential and basic than that of self-confidence and self-reliance, both of these terms being but expressions of the idea of faith in oneself. The man who has faith in himself not only brings under his control and direction those wonderful powers of his subconscious mentality, and the full power of his conscious mental faculties and instruments, but also tends to inspire a similar feeling in the minds and hearts of those other individuals with whom he comes in contact in the course of his pursuit of the objects of his endeavors. An intuitive perception and realization of one's own powers and energies capacity and efficiency, possibilities and capabilities, is an essential attribute of the individual who is destined to success. A study of the world of men will disclose the fact that those men who eventually succeed, who arrive, ultimately, who do things, are marked by this deep intuitive faith in themselves, and by their confident expectation of ultimate success. These men rise superior to the incidents of temporary defeat. They use these failures as stepping stones to ultimate victory. They are living expressions of Henley's Invictus. They, indeed, are the masters of their fate, the captains of their souls. Such men are never really defeated. Like rubber balls, they have that bounce which causes them to rise triumphantly after each fall. The harder they are thrown down, the higher do they rise on the rebound. Such men are always possible, nay, probable and certain, victors, so long as they maintain this intuitive faith in self, or self-confidence. It is only when this is lost that they are really defeated or destroyed. The failures in life are discovered usually to be either, 1. Those who have never manifested this faith in self, or self-confidence, or else, 2. Those who have permitted themselves to lose the same under the bludgeonings of chance. Those who have never felt the thrill of faith in self, or of self-confidence, are soon labeled by their fellows as lacking the elements of successful achievement. The world soon gets their numbers, and places them where they belong. Their lack of self-faith and self-confidence is felt by those with whom they come in contact. The world lacks faith in them and has no confident expectation of their success. Those who once have had this self-faith or self-confidence, but who have lost it by reason of temporary failure or setbacks, are in even a still worse condition. This, because while the never had it class have merely a lack of the inspiriting quality, these had it but lost it individuals actually have now a positive unfaith, distrust, and disbelief in themselves and their abilities. They believe that luck is against me, and they actually entertain confident expectation that the worst is yet to come. They have set the law of mental attraction operating against them, instead of for them. Their only hope is to reverse their backward-running mental engine, and once more to get that I can and I will spirit. The study of the life story of the successful men in all walks of life will illustrate this principle to you so forcibly that, having perceived it, you will never again doubt its absolute truth. In practically every case you will find that these successful men have been knocked down, and bowled out, many times in the early days of their careers, often even later on in life. But the knockout, though perhaps dazing them for a short time, never robbed them of their gameness, their will to succeed. They always arose to their feet before they were counted out, and they always grimly, but resolutely, faced fate. Though their heads were bloody, they were unbowed, as Henley triumphantly chants. Fate cannot defeat such a spirit. In time, destiny recognizes the fact that here is a man, and being feminine, she falls in love with him and bestows her favors upon him. If you will examine carefully the variety of confident men in the world around you, you will find that they may be grouped into two general classes. The first of these classes is made up of the vainglorious, egotistical, conceited men, the braggarts, the boasters, the cheap persons who are enamored by their own personality, and who delude themselves, as they seek also to delude the world, into the belief that they are really great and wonderful men. They are conceited, not self-believers. They are filled with vanity, not with true self-reliance and self-respect. They are the peacocks and apes of the world of men, not its lions and eagles. They are base counterfeits of the self-reliant, self-confident men of the true type. They are but laths painted to resemble iron. They are false fronts, possessing no real stability or power, and having nothing serving to back them up. The world soon discovers them to be, in the slang phrases so expressive of the spirit of the idea, two spots trying to be aces, or four-flushers. Yet, at least for a time, they often manage to fool persons, but sooner or later they crumple, shrivel and fade from view. The second class of confident individuals is made up of men who pay but little attention to the superficial aspects of personality, except, perhaps, to employ such as their tools and instruments in working upon the world of superficial observers. Instead, They have a deep underlying faith in that something within, which they have discovered to be the center of their power and being. The I am I looms large in their mental vision, but that I is the great I of true individuality, and not the insignificant I of superficial personality. These men distinguish and differentiate between the John Smith, grocer, age 46, part of themselves, and that mysterious I am I, which recognizes that the outer mask of personality is merely that of the part they are now playing in the great game of life, in the cosmic drama. The truly great and successful men in all walks of life intuitively recognize that the elements of personality, which the masses of the public seem to think constitutes the real individuality of the successful man, are at the best but petty and trifling things, things worn about the individuality as one wears his everyday garments, and that the real individual, himself, is hidden from the sight of the lovers of superficiality, though being the most real thing in the world to the true individual. Himself. The true individual has the most intense faith in his individuality, but regards his personality as merely something necessary for his personal manifestation and presence, and never as the thing in itself of his being. This statement will appear meaningless to those who are unable to distinguish between the inner individuality and the outer personality, between the I and the me, as some have expressed it. But all who have caught even the faintest glimpse of the real self, who have entered into the dawn of the I am I consciousness, these will know what we mean, and will strive toward a fuller realization and manifestation of that something within. That moment in which the soul first experiences this consciousness of I am I, it is born into a new world, a world in which faith in itself becomes an intuitive perception, and in which the confident expectation of the realization of that faith becomes an habitual mental attitude. We are not seeking to lead you into a maze of metaphysical speculation or mystic contemplation by calling your attention to this great subject and object of your faith in yourself, this immanent I am I, this wondrous something within yourself, which abides in that secret place of your temple of being. Instead, we are asking you to lay aside, at least temporarily, all such mental activities directed toward abstract subjects or objects, and to turn your gaze inward until, becoming accustomed to the seeming darkness, you will see, at first faintly, then plainly, that magnificent being which is yourself, glowing in a light soft but penetrating, the inner light. When you have found this, then verily have you found that true subject and object of faith in yourself, the only true subject and object of self-faith, the subject and object of which all the subjects and objects of mere temporal ephemeral personality are but pitiful imitations or base counterfeits. When you have found this real self, that something within, this I am I, then have you found that inner and real self which has constituted the subject and object of that faith and confident expectation which have inspired, animated, enthused, and sustained the thousands of men who have reached the heights of attainment by the path of definite ideals, insistent desire, confident expectation, persistent determination, and balanced compensation. It is this intuitive perception and consciousness of the real self which has caused men to live out the ideal of Invictus, in the spirit of that glorious poem of Henley. Nothing but this inner realization would have been sufficient to fill the soul of man with this indomitable spirit and unconquerable will. No mere vanity of personal being, no mere belief therein, would have been sufficient. There is needed the certain, positive faith based upon the underlying individuality, upon the real self, upon the I am I, to enable man to utter that tremendous statement, I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul. In the spirit of this realization in consciousness of your real self, of your I am I, read once more that inspired poem of Henley to which we have so repeatedly alluded in our preceding consideration of this subject of faith in yourself. It will serve as a refreshing and stimulating bath in the fountain of inspiration for you. It is, indeed, inspiration, and you feel it to be such. It is the voice of its authors, I am I, calling to the I am I, within yourself, the roar of the lion of individuality within him which awakens corresponding vibrations in that lion within yourself. Faith in Yourself Invictus. By W. E. Henley. Out of the night that covers me. Black as the pit from pole to pole. I thank whatever gods there be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell clutch of circumstance, I have not winced or cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. Beyond this veil of doubt and fear looms but the terror of the shade, and, yet, the passing of the years finds, and shall find me, unafraid. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul. It was in this spirit of the consciousness of the real self, and of this conviction of its innate power and its destiny to eventually triumph, that the ancient Stoic philosophers bade their followers to center their consciousness upon the indwelling spirit rather than upon the physical garment called the body, or even upon those instruments of the self called the mind. They were wont to remind their followers that, a man may not always master the details of his external circumstances, but he can be master of himself, and, accordingly, the master of his fate. It was in this spirit that the ancient Hindu sages bade their students to dwell in the consciousness of the real self, for that cannot be wounded by the sword, nor killed by the spear, neither can it be burned by fire, drowned by water, crushed by earth, or blown out by the air. The wise teachers of the race have for centuries taught that this faith in the real self, in the I am I, will enable the individual to convert into the instruments of his success even those circumstances which apparently are destined to defeat his purposes, and to transmute into beneficent agencies even those inimical forces which beset him on all sides. They have discovered, and passed on to their followers, the knowledge, that such a faith is a spiritual power, a living force, which when trusted and rightly employed will annihilate the opposition of outward circumstances, or else convert them into workers for good. They have noted how the casualties of life seem to bow to a spirit that will not bow to them, and will yield to subserve a design which they may, in their first apparent tendency, threaten to frustrate. They have discovered that, when such a spirit is recognized, it is curious to see how the space clears around a man and leaves him room and freedom. They have seen, and told us, that there is no chance, no destiny, no fate, that can circumvent, or hinder, or control, the firm resolve of a determined soul, and that there can be no determined soul in the absence of faith in the real and indwelling self. We are here not preaching to you the doctrine of the cultivation of a bumptious, conceited, forward, pushing, cocksureness, based upon vain conceit and cheap assurance of personal merit and capacity. There is no mental attitude further removed from the true conviction of individual innate power and capacity than is that pitiful imitation of it which is far too common. The blustering, noisy, boasting, egotism which seeks to exalt the personal self and to glorify its achievements or possible attainments, is the very antithesis of that quiet, calm, restrained sense of innate power and capacity which is experienced and manifested by the individual who has found within himself that center of personal power which is his real self, his I am I. Egotism, that cheap self-praise, self-exaltation, and vain conceit, is but the tawdry and pinchbeck imitation of that true egoism which is based upon the certainty of the power and possibilities of the individual ego, or the I am I. The former marks the person whose overweening vanity causes him to exalt and glorify his mean personal attainments and his pitifully weak personal powers. The latter distinguishes the individual of true power and real capacity, who manifests his efficiency and capabilities in deeds, not in words, in actions, not in braggadocio, in performance, not in swaggering, boasting, vaporings concerning his fancied ability in his imaginary deeds. There is a difference as wide as that betwixt the poles between true egoism and base egotism. Be sure that you differentiate between these two opposing mental attitudes. The real self, the I am I, which is the true and proper subject and base of your faith in yourself, and of your confident expectation based upon this, is that something real within yourself which abides permanent, stable, firm, immutable, amidst the surrounding temporal, shifting, changing physical and mental processes which compose your emotional equipment. It is the true individual surrounded by the incidents and instruments of your personality. It is that center of being around which moves the complex mechanism of your personal existence. It is that absolutely subjective entity which acts through the objective instrumentality of your mind and body which you have regarded as yourself, but which in reality are but phases of the mechanism through which the self acts in order to manifest itself in objective existence. In that volume of this series entitled Personal Power, we have instructed you concerning this real self, and therein have pointed out to you the methods of mental analysis by means of which this real self may be disentangled from its machinery of mind and body. In fact, this discovery of the real self and of its effective manifestation, when once achieved, forms one of the two great essential principles of this entire course of instruction embodied in this series of books. Our concern here is merely that of identifying that discovered real self with that self which is the true and only valid basis for your faith in yourself, and of your confident expectation of its successful manifestation in thought, word, and deed. Your real self is a ray from the great sun of spirit, a spark from the great flame of spirit, a focal point of expression of that infinite self of spirit. The Orientals strive to indicate this relation of the self to the self by the illustration of the reflection of the sun in a million waterpots. There is but one real sun, but in each pot there is a perfect represented image of that sun which serves to illumine the water in the pot, and which shines with force and power when the waves and ripples of the water are stilled and calm. Others have compared the self to the tiny whirlpool in the great ocean of spirit. Others have sought to illustrate it by the analogy of the brilliant glow in the electric lamp, the result of the power of the principle of electricity manifesting through the resisting carbon in the lamp. But all of these illustrations and analogous representations are feeble and inadequate, though they may serve to point out and to indicate the nature of the relationship between the infinite power and its individual expressions. Enough for us to state here is the fact that you, your real self, your I am I, is real, permanent, firm, stable, true, the only thing that is so in your entire personal being, just as spirit is the only thing so in the infinity of being manifested in and through the cosmos. Your faith in it is as fully warranted as is your faith in the infinite power of the cosmos, for at the last the two are one in essence and fundamental being. Your real self is the absolute fact of your being, the one and only such absolute fact. All the rest is relative and comparative, finite and conditioned by circumstance. Your real self is your master self. It is the king on the throne of your personal being. When you realize this, then you will assert your kingship and your mastery over all of your mental powers, conscious, subconscious and unconscious, and of your physical powers as well. Surely such an entity is worthy of your faith, and of your confident expectation of the manifestation of its powers. The earnest faith in your real self, and your confident expectation concerning its manifestation and expression in your work, your endeavors, your plans, your purposes, serve to bring into action your full mental and spiritual power, energy, and force. It quickens your intellectual powers, it employs your emotional powers efficiently and under full control, it sets into effective action your creative imagination, it places the powers of your will under your mastery and direction. It draws upon your subconscious faculties for inspiration and for intuitive reports, it opens up your mind to the inflow of the illumination of your superconscious spiritual faculties and powers. It sets into operation the law of mental attraction under your direct control and direction, whereby you attract to yourself, or you to them, the circumstances, events, conditions, things and persons needed for the manifestation of your ideals in objective reality. More than this, it brushes away the obstacles which have clogged the channels of your contact with and communication with spirit itself, that great source of infinite power which in this instruction is called power. Discover your real self, your I am I, then manifest your full faith in and toward it, and cultivate your full confident expectation concerning the beneficent results of that faith. Faith in the infinite. Faith in the successful outcome of your efforts, your undertakings, your expression of your innate powers, leads inevitably to your faith in yourself, your faith in your real self and in its powers and capacities for the efficient performance of the work which constitutes your field of outward expression. In truth, faith in your real self, in your I am I, inevitably leads you to that highest and most magnificent manifestation of faith and confident expectation, namely, faith in and the confident expectation of the manifestation of the beneficence and kindly power of that infinite presence power from which all things proceed, and in which all things live and move and have their being. That there exists an infinite and eternal presence power, an infinite and absolute principle of life, mind, will, which is the source, fount and origin of all manifested living existence, which is the creative agency by means of which all creation exists and is performed, which is the combining, correlating and coordinating power evident in all the processes of the cosmos, such is the inevitable, invariable and infallible report of human reason exercised to the full limits of its powers along the lines of philosophical thought, and such is also the report of human faith extended to its full capacity. Reason finds this report inevitably present as the base and ground of its most profound thought. Intuition corroborates and verifies such conclusion. The opposite of this ultimate report of combined reason and intuition is unthinkable. To deny it is equivalent to the denial of the very base and ground of rational thought itself. In that volume of the present series entitled Spiritual Power, we have considered this subject in detail and at length, and have shown not only that reason is compelled by its fundamental laws to make a final report of this kind, but also just why it is compelled to do so. In addition, we have shown that intuition agrees in this final report of truth, and just why this is inevitable. The consideration of the facts so presented brings the conviction that this fundamental intuition of truth is as firmly established, and as little open to successful denial and refutation, as is the fact of the fundamental intuitive assurance of the reality of your actual existence as a living entity. Here, faith becomes an actual knowing. It rises to the position of a faith that knows, not merely believes. Reason and intuition, employed to their full limits of power and capacity for the discovery and announcing of truth, establish the following basic and fundamental facts of existence, viz. 1. That there is present in being and power an infinite and eternal creative power which is the causeless cause of the cosmic manifestation, in whole and in its parts, of the world and its manifold activities which are experienced by us through our consciousness. 2. That there is present and in being an infinite and eternal coordinative power which combines, correlates and coordinates the activities of the multiplicity of apparently separate objects and activities of the cosmos into one harmonious whole operating under universal law and order in which there is no room or place for blind chance or accident. 3. That there is present in being and power an infinite and eternal life principle, which is the constant, permanent, unchangeable, invariable, identical essential essence of livingness which animates and inspires the countless manifestations of life and livingness perceived to exist in the cosmos, and which is the essential base and ground for the multiplicity of changing, temporal, impermanent living forms and their activities which arise, abide for a time, and then pass away in the cosmic process. 4. That the infinite and eternal creative power, the infinite and eternal coordinative power, the infinite and eternal life principle, are, at the last, but one in essence, substance and reality. They are but aspects under which we become aware of the absolute presence power which is the source and origin, the base and ground, the creator and the author, the supporter and the sustainer, the combiner, correlator and coordinator, the essence and substance of the entire cosmic manifestation, consisting of an infinity of universes with all contained therein. This one absolute presence power is absolute unity, absolute presence, absolute power. It is the ultimate reality, the final and basic fact, the absolute truth of existence. There is and can be nothing known to us except this ultimate reality and its cosmic manifestations. 5. This ultimate reality, this infinite and eternal presence power, is discovered to be immaterial and not material. It is perceived to be pure spirit in its ultimate essence, in its real nature, character and being. Its fundamental laws are spiritual laws, this being true even of the physical laws and principles operative in the world of materiality which is its cosmic manifestation. The world of manifestation, in its essence, is contained in the being of this infinite and eternal presence power, and this infinite and eternal presence power is immanent and present in each and every part and portion, object or activity, of that world of manifestation. There is nowhere outside of the infinite presence power, for in its presence and in its power this ultimate reality abides in everything, everywhere, and in all time. All is in the all, and the all is in all things. 7. You, your real self, your I am I, are a center of power, a focal point of expression and manifestation, in and of that infinite and eternal spiritual power. In the degree that you realize this, so will be the degree of your possible manifestation of personal power. In the degree that you realize this, so will be the degree of your possible individual contact with the infinite presence power, and of the opening and freeing of your spiritual channels of communication with and from it. You may become in tune with the infinite, in unison with infinity, in this way. In this way, you may contact the infinite in consciousness. In the degree that you recognize and realize your actual essential identity with the infinite and eternal presence power, so will be the degree of your possible manifestation, expression and actualization of that ultimate reality which is the source, origin and fount of infinite power, and which is the infinite self of which your I am I is the focal point or center of expression and manifestation. In the volume of this series entitled Spiritual Power, to which we have referred, we have transmitted to you the following message of truth as announced in principle by the great illumined spiritual teachers of the race, of all ages, all peoples, all lands, all creeds, which our students are requested to commit to memory and to make the essential and basic fact of their mental and spiritual lives. Hearken to this message of truth as announced by such high authorities, the message of truth. You, yourself, in your essential and real being, nature, and entity, are spirit, and naught but spirit, in and of spirit, spiritual and not material. Materiality is your instrument of expression, the stuff created for your use and service in your expression of life, consciousness and will. It is your servant, not your master. You condition, limit and form it, not it you, when you recognize and realize your real nature, and awaken to a perception of its real relation to you and you to it. The report of spirit, received by its accredited individual centers of expression, and by them transmitted to you is this. In the degree that you perceive, recognize, and realize your essential identity with me, the supreme presence power, the ultimate reality, in that degree will you be able to manifest my spiritual power. I am over and above you, under and beneath you, I surround you on all sides. I am also within you, and you are in me, from me you proceed, and in me you live and move and have your being. Seek me by looking within your own being, and likewise by looking for me in infinity, for I abide both within and without your being. If and when you will adopt and live according to this truth, then will you be able to manifest that truth. In and by it alone are freedom and invincibility, and true and real presence and power, to be found, perceived, realized and manifested. In the above stated message of truth will be found the essence of the esoteric teaching and inner doctrine of all of the world's great religions and most profound philosophies. In all religions there exist, 1. The exoteric or outer teaching and doctrine intended for the great masses of persons who are unable to understand or to grasp the deep truths and doctrines, those who are not as yet ready for the full truth, and who are not as yet able to bear the truth, and 2. The esoteric or inner teaching and doctrine intended for those who have developed spiritual perception to an extent enabling them to grasp, understand, and assimilate the full spirit of the truth. In the sacred writings of all of these great religions will be found constant though carefully guarded references to the existence of this dual aspect of teaching and doctrine. The essence and substance of this inner doctrine, or esoteric teaching, is found to be practically and essentially the same in all of the great world religions and philosophies, notwithstanding the wide difference in the exoteric teaching and doctrines and in the names and forms employed therein. This essence and substance is found to be capable of expression in 3 brief general axioms, as follows. Ultimate reality, truth, being and principle is one and one only. In its essential and fundamental nature it is spiritual and not material, the one ultimate principle of being is spirit. 2. The soul or spirit of man is identical in nature and essence with the infinite spiritual principle or being. It is a spark from the divine flame, a ray from the divine sun, or a reflection of the divine presence. This undetached fragment from the divine life is immanent within the being of every human individual, though usually undetected by reason of being hidden and covered with the mass of finite, personal characteristics. But no matter how much hidden or covered over, it is always there, its light burning brightly though obscured from ordinary perception. 3. By faith in the infinite presence power, which abides within and without the individual soul, and by the confident expectation of its manifestation through the channels of individuality, the individual soul proceeds to clear away the obstructing debris of finite personality, with its mass of doubt, distrust, disbelief and unfaith, and to afford a clear passage of the spiritual light and power of the indwelling presence power. By so doing it also opens the channels of contact with and inspiration from the superimposing presence power of infinity. Pause a moment at this point, and consider carefully the above three axiomatic statements of the esoteric teaching and doctrine of all the great religions and philosophies. You will find that you have always known of these, though you have never clearly recognized them. If you have studied the great religions other than your own, you will now see that this teaching and doctrine is implicit in each and all of them. Piercing the surface of the exoteric teachings and doctrines of your own religion, you will find this teaching and doctrine expressed in them in veiled and guarded terms. Now that your eyes have been opened to the truth, you will find corroboration of these teachings in many hitherto perplexing and mystifying passages in your own scriptures. If, as is probable, you have been reared in some branch of the Christian Church, you will find in the words of the Master, and of that great teacher, St. Paul, numerous corroborations of this truth. If, instead, you are a Jew, you will find in the Hebrew Scriptures abundant testimony along the same lines. The ancient prophets of Israel knew and taught this truth, as references to their writings will fully establish. Likewise, if you are a Hindu, a Buddhist, a Mohammedan, you will find in your sacred books a full corroboration of the above statement. As the ancient Oriental sages were wont to say, the truth is one, though men call it by many names, and express it by many different terms. Moreover, in all of the esoteric teaching and doctrine, so announced by the founders of the great religions and their successors, you will find that the road to the recognition, realization and manifestation of the truth is always that of the path of faith. Even before works, there is placed faith. Before the manifestation, there must come the full realization, and before the full realization must come the full recognition and the perception, accompanied by the deep feeling of faith. Before the believer may justly expect to reap, he must sow the seeds of confident expectation. Everywhere we find the repeated and constantly reiterated note of faith, faith, faith. We are constantly admonished to have faith, coupled with the promise that if faith be had and maintained, all the rest shall be added unto you. In Jewish and Christian theology, faith is that mental act of man which places him in an acceptable relation to God. In Mohammedanism, faith in Allah is a prerequisite to knowledge of the divine, and the bestowal of divine aid. In Hinduism, faith in Brahman is the master key. In Buddhism, faith in the law which makes for good is an absolute necessity to the seeker after nirvana. Everywhere, faith is held to be the first, and absolutely necessary step toward attainment. If this be true concerning the exoteric teaching and doctrine, it is thrice true of the esoteric presentation of the truth, for in the latter it takes on a mystic and occult significance. As an ancient mystic once said, there is a white magic in faith which transcends all other forms or powers of magic. In the exoteric teachings and doctrine, faith is advocated and demanded because of its claimed power to place man in close relationship with the Supreme Being, and to render possible a spiritual rapport or sympathetic accord with divine power. It is there held that the Supreme Being demands faith as a prerequisite of the bestowal of favors and gifts. In the esoteric teaching and doctrine, however, while faith is still more earnestly insisted upon as a prerequisite of attainment, there is not this rather naive and primitive explanation: Instead, faith is explained as that act by means of which the individual soul enters into a fuller recognition and realization of its essential identity with, and contact with the divine principle, and thus is enabled to unfold and to manifest those divine powers which are inherent and latent within its nature. Faith, in the exoteric sense, is a rapport, i.e., sympathetic accord relationship. In the esoteric, it is rather a rapprochement, or act of reapproach or coming together again after a separation, or act or fact of again coming or being drawn near or together. Even those not accepting the doctrine of the essential identity of the individual soul with the universal soul, and who occupy the agnostic position regarding this question, must be forced to admit as logically sound the argument that if the individual soul is potentially divine, then the act of earnest, positive faith in its potentially divine nature and possibilities must serve to unfold into manifestation such powers. The esoteric doctrine, however, does not rest merely upon this undoubtedly logically sound premise or proposition. It bases its chief claim upon the fact that the soul which proceeds, as if this were so, soon begins to manifest its powers to such an extent that further doubt is impossible. Thus the proof or the esoteric teaching and doctrine is, at the last, a matter of actual personal experience. Cries the mystic, taste, only taste, taste, and you will know the virtue of the wine. Faith in the infinite, then, consists primarily of the firm, earnest, positive belief in the three axiomatic statements heretofore presented to you, or their equivalents which are found in the esoteric teachings of any and all of the various great religions or philosophies of the world. If this faith be had and maintained, then it inevitably follows that faith in the beneficent good nature of the cosmic activities will arise. If the ultimate spiritual principle is embodied in the individual soul, then it must be inclined to be good to that soul. Ultimate reality must be good to itself, and if it recognizes the individual soul as a divine fragment of itself, then it must be good to that part of itself. The esoteric teaching and doctrine, however, hold that this recognition of common identity of the universal soul and the individual soul is more or less a mutual process. They hold that the individual soul striving to enter into this consciousness of identity with the divine, seeking its greater self, sets into operation certain powers of the universal soul which cause the latter to seek rapprochement, or reapproach or coming together, of the two apparently separated portions of the divine essence, i.e., the macrocosm and the microcosm. This being granted, it is easily seen that the act or mental attitude of faith in the infinite, and in one's essential relation to it, or essential identity with it, must operate in the direction of the rapprochement, or coming together again, of the universal principle and its particular manifestation. Like the waterspout appearing on the high seas, the water from the ocean swirls around and rises to meet and to be united with the descending whirling mass of heavy vapor from the clouds. Royce says, "We long for the Absolute only in so far as in us the Absolute also longs, and seeks, through our very temporal striving, the peace that is nowhere in time, but only, and yet absolutely, in eternity." Evelyn Underwood says, "All mystical thinkers agree in thinking that there is a mutual attraction between the spark of the soul, the free divine germ in man, and the fount from which it came forth. The homeward journey of man's spirit, then, is due to the push of a divine life within answering to the pull of a divine life without. It is a going of like to like, the fulfillment of a cosmic necessity." Resijak says, "According to mysticism, the soul is led to the frontiers of the Absolute and is even given an impulsion to enter, but this is not enough. This movement of pure freedom cannot succeed unless there is an equivalent movement within the Absolute itself." Francis Thompson, in his mystic poem entitled The Hound of Heaven, describes with a tremendous power, and often with an almost terrible intensity, the hunt of reality for the unwilling individual self. He pictures reality as engaged in a remorseless, tireless quest, a seeking, following, tracking down of the unwilling individual soul. He pictures the separated spirit as a strange, piteous, futile thing that flees from the pursuing reality down the nights and down the days. The individual spirit, not knowing its relation to and identity with the pursuing Absolute, rushes in a panic of terror away from its own good. But, as Emerson says, you cannot escape your own good, and, so the fleeing soul is captured at last. By faith in the infinite, however, the individual soul overcomes its terror of the infinite, and, recognizing it as its supreme good, it turns and moves toward it. Such is the mystic conception of the effect and action of faith in the infinite. Even those philosophers who view the cosmos as an infinite process, operated by an infinite spiritual law rather than by the will of a divine being, even they, unreservedly and fully, likewise teach and preach the paramount value of faith in the infinite. Heraclitus, the ancient Greek philosopher who taught the doctrine of the eternal becoming, the Stoics with their doctrine of cosmic law and order, and the ancient Buddhists with their doctrine of the law of eternal change, all these taught as the highest wisdom the unquestioning faith in the law. Everything, they said, is under law, and proceeds according to order. Wisdom consists in having absolute faith in that law, and in falling in with its action, movement, and processes. Faith in and obedience to the law is the highest religion, said these thinkers, and they held that only through such could the individual reach the mount of attainment. There are many practical philosophers of our own lands and age who, while more or less agnostic concerning the existence of a divine supreme being, at least of such conceived as a person, nevertheless are in full agreement with the ancient philosophers just mentioned in the general conception that the cosmos is governed by infinite law and proceeds according to eternal order, and this law and order they conceive to be spiritual rather than material. Like Heraclitus, the Stoics, and the original Buddhists, the modern philosophers conceive it to be the highest wisdom on the part of man, as well as his manifest duty toward himself and the universe as well, to arouse and to manifest a firm, absolute, certain and unquestioning faith in the existence and operation of the infinite law and the eternal order, and in the belief that it operates in the direction of ultimate good, and to endeavor to move along with the cosmic current, to acquire and to maintain the cosmic rhythm, to beat time and to keep step with the cosmic order, in short, to get and to keep in tune with the infinite. These thinkers, while very practical and pragmatic, nevertheless manifest toward this infinite law and eternal order a mental attitude of faith and confident expectation which closely resembles the corresponding mental attitude of the devout religious believer. To them, as to him, faith is the cardinal principle of their thought and action. They do not shrink from that extreme test of pragmatism, viz., would you trust your life to it? Instead, they trust not only their lives, but their welfare, their happiness, and all that is worth while in human existence, to the operation of that law. They have found it to be the most practical form of philosophy, a philosophy that works out in actual life, and which surely pays in the end. This pragmatic philosophy, like most of the philosophies worthy of the name, and like all of the great religions, is based upon faith and confident expectation. Like all other forms of earnest thought and belief, it has its roots in intuition, and intuition breathes the very spirit of faith. It is not our purpose, nor our duty, to direct you concerning your form of religious belief, or regarding your school of philosophy. These are matters entirely for the exercise of your own reason with the cooperation of your intuition. But we conceive it to be our duty, and it is certainly our purpose, here to advise you, with all the earnestness at our command, to cultivate the mental attitude of faith, absolute and unquestioning faith, in the presence and power of an infinite and eternal ultimate reality of a spiritual nature, and to cultivate an equally earnest and fervent faith in the operation of the law and order manifested by that ultimate reality. Call the latter what you will, God, principle, power, truth, law, or the unknowable reality. Following this, and dependent upon it, should be the confident expectation that this infinite law and eternal order will tend to operate in the direction of your ultimate good, in the measure in which you have faith in it and confident expectation concerning its ultimate beneficent results. Even if you cannot perceive the merit of the philosophical reasoning which leads to this conclusion, even if you are devoid of the religious conviction which brings the similar report, you are justified in accepting such a conception as warranted by the rule of pragmatism which is expressed in the axiom, that which works may be accepted as practical truth. Lack of faith in the infinite law and eternal order weakens you, and renders you less efficient, therefore such is a negative quality. Actual distrust, disbelief, unfaith and doubt are worse than mere negative qualities. They are positive and active in the wrong direction, and tend to reverse the movement, action and direction of the cosmic forces, producing that shadow of good which is called evil. Before beginning, and without an end. As space eternal and as surety sure. Is fixed a power divine which moves to good. Only its laws endure. It mocketh and unmaketh, mending all. What it hath wrought is better than hath been. Slow grows the splendid pattern that it plans. Its wistful hands between. It will not be condemned by any one. Who thwarts it loses, and who serves it gains. The hidden good it pays with peace and bliss. The hidden ill with pains. Such is the law which moves to righteousness. Which none at last can turn aside or stay. The heart of it is love, and end of it is peace and consummation sweet. Obey. Ho! Ye who suffer, I know ye suffer from yourselves. Naught else compels. Within yourself deliverance must be sought. Each man his prison makes. Laugh and be glad, for there is liberty. Prentice Mulford, that eccentric genius who was really one of the great pioneers of the practical phase of the modern new metaphysical movement, although he is seldom given the credit to which he is really entitled in this particular field, once expressed very forcibly the spirit of the true teaching concerning faith in the infinite, in the following remarkable passage culled from one of his early books. A supreme power and wisdom govern the universe. The supreme mind is measureless and pervades endless space. The supreme wisdom, power and intelligence are in everything that exists, from the atom to the planet. The supreme power has us in its charge, as it has the suns and endless systems of worlds in space. As we grow more to recognize this sublime and exhaustless wisdom, we shall learn more and more to demand that wisdom, draw it to ourselves, and thereby be ever making ourselves newer and newer. This means ever perfecting health, greater and greater power to enjoy all that exists, gradual transition into a higher state of being, and the development of powers which we do not now realize as belonging to us. Let us then daily demand faith, for faith is power to believe and power to see that all things are parts of the infinite Spirit of God, that all things have good or God in them, and that all things, when recognized by us as parts of God, must work for our good. The following statement of the general basic principles of the modern New Thought movement was made several years ago by one of the writers of the present book. It is reproduced here because we think that it presents in concise form the essential spirit of the philosophy of that great modern school of thought just named, after the non-essential and debatable teachings of its various branches have been ironed out. There exists a great underlying something or somewhat that is beneficent and well-disposed toward you, and which tries to help, aid, and assist you whenever and wherever it can do so. 2. Faith and confident expectation regarding the beneficent power of that something or somewhat tends to open the channels of its influence in your life, while doubt, unbelief, distrust, and fear tend to dam up the channel of its influence in your life, and to rob it of the power to help you. 3. To a great extent, at least, you determine your own life by the character of your thought. By the nature and character of your thoughts you furnish the pattern or mold which determines or modifies the efforts of the something or somewhat to aid you, either in the direction of producing desirable results, or else in bringing about undesirable results by reason of your damming up the source of your good. These three fundamental principles of New Thought, which is really the oldest kind of thought expressed in new forms, will serve you as the strongest kind of basic platform for practical New Thought demonstration. If you will stand firmly on this platform, make its teachings and principles a part of yourself, and strive to manifest its truth and facts in your own life, then you will be the very best kind of New Thoughtist, even though you may never have heard even a word of New Thought teaching, metaphysical speculation, or philosophical theorizing. In that volume of this series entitled Spiritual Power, especially in its concluding section entitled Unison with Infinity, you will find a far more extended reference to this particular phase of the general subject of faith and confident expectation directed toward the infinite. If you are interested in this special teaching, we feel justified in recommending to your attention the book just named. The advanced students of the esoteric teaching contained in the scriptures of all the great religions, as well as their inspired teachers, are aware that in the Book of Psalms, in our own scriptures, are to be found several of the great masterpieces of the esoteric teachings concerning faith power. In them is given the essence of the secret doctrine concerning faith in the infinite. Chief among these are the 23rd Psalm and the 91st Psalm, respectively. So important are these two great esoteric poems, so filled with practical, helpful information are they, that we deem it advisable to reproduce them here that you may avail yourself of their virtue and power at this particular stage of this instruction. Accordingly, they are given on the next following 2 pages of this book. The Psalm of Faith. Psalm XXI. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in the green pastures, he leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul, he leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies, thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The Psalm of Security, Psalm XCI. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in Him will I trust. Surely He shall deliver thee from the snare of the fowler, and from the noisome pestilence. He shall cover thee with His feathers, and under His wings shalt thou trust, His truth shall be thy shield and buckler. Thou shalt not be afraid for the terror by night, nor for the arrow that fleeth by day, nor for the pestilence that walketh in darkness, nor for the destruction that wasteth at noonday. 1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come nigh thee. Only with thine eyes shalt thou behold and see the reward of the wicked. Because thou hast made the Lord, which is my refuge, even the Most High, thy habitation. There shall no evil befall thee, neither shall any plague come nigh thy dwelling. For He shall give His angels charge over thee, to keep thee in all thy ways. They shall bear thee up in their hands, lest thou dash thy foot against a stone. Thou shalt tread upon the lion and the adder, the young lion and the dragon shalt thou trample under feet. Because He hath set His love upon me, and therefore will I deliver him, I will set him on high, because he hath known my name. He shall call upon me, and I will answer him, I will be with him in trouble, I will deliver him, and honor him. With long life will I satisfy him, and show him my salvation. The teachers and students of the inner teachings, the ancient wisdom, the secret doctrine, are also aware of the esoteric spiritual significance of the lines of the well-known hymn, Lead Kindly Light, written by Newman in a period of spiritual stress. Few who read or sing this hymn realize its esoteric spirit and meaning, none but those who know, perceive and recognize that which dwells under the surface of those wonderful words and lines, but it is a matter of common notice and comment that even many persons who are outside of the fold of the Church find great inspiration, help, courage and practical aid from that wonderful hymn. We feel that we may close this part of our instruction no more fitly than by quoting the lines of that magnificent verse. We trust that you may be able to plunge beneath its surface and discover, in the deep places, the spirit of that great chant of faith power. The chant of faith power, lead kindly light, amid the encircling gloom. Lead thou me on. The night is dark, and I am far from home. Lead thou me on. Keep thou my feet, I do not ask to see the distant scene, one step enough for me. Lead thou me on. Carry with you ever the spirit of the ancient aphorism of the wise sage, which we have already quoted for your benefit in the pages of this book, and which adorns its title page. Faith is the white magic of power. Willpower, your dynamic forces. Willpower. Of all the varied manifestations of power proceeding from that power which the best human thought perceives to be the source and origin of all the power in the universe, that manifestation which we know as willpower seems to be the most fundamental, the most elemental, the most universal. It is seen by philosophers to constitute the very kernel or heart of all phases and forms of personal power. Many, indeed, have held that in willpower abides the ultimate principle of the universe, and that all forms of power, force and energy, at the last, must be thought of in terms of willpower. Whatever may be the ultimate facts of the universe, there can be no dispute concerning the dominating position occupied by willpower in the life and being of the individual man. When you undertake the task of self-analysis, you will find your will at the very center of your being, so close to the I am I or ego, that it is most difficult to disentangle it from your real self. Your sensations, your passions, your emotions, your tastes and your talents are found to be under the control of your trained will. You may set them aside from yourself and analyze them, correct them, improve them, but the will lies closer to yourself. You cannot set it apart from yourself as you can the other mental states. It is neither sensation nor emotion, though it may dominate both. It is always subjective and active, abiding and operating from the very citadel of your being. Emotion and thought may lie deep in your being, but will lies still deeper. Emotion and thought are objective to the will, and may be influenced and directed by it. You are conscious of your sensations and of your emotions as merely incidental to your existence. But you are directly conscious of your will, just as you are conscious of your self-existence. You can modify your other mental states, but you cannot modify your will in the same way. The will is your sole instrument of modification and it cannot be turned back on itself. The office of the will is that of action, and in its activities it directs and orders, commands and regulates the other mental states. In fact, the will acts chiefly through and by means of its control and direction of your other mental states. Willpower may be developed and trained, of course, otherwise this book would have no purpose and intent. But it is not to be developed and trained as are the other mental states or powers, for these are modified by the action of the will upon them. Unlike theirs, its development consists rather of the unfolding into fuller expression of a fundamental power which already exists, the transformation of latent and static will into active and dynamic will. This form of development is defined as the act of freeing from that which envelopes. Its training, likewise, is different. Instead of its being trained by a higher mental faculty or power, the will itself proceeds to improve, deepen, widen and strengthen the channels through which its currents flow. We, therefore, employ the term, the development and training of the will, only in this sense. Will culture really is the process of providing the will with the appropriate mental instruments for its fuller expression and manifestation, and of encouraging it to employ them. The will always is there, abiding in full power. It is your part to supply it with the proper incentives to action, and to furnish it with the channels of habit and use through which it may flow freely. Strange to say, you must employ the powers of will itself in order to provide these requisites for its own fuller expression. At the last, the will itself must will to provide itself with the instruments of willing. The will must will to will, and to will into being the instruments of its future willing. But the will always is content to do these things when properly aroused. We need not labor to convince you that it is desirable for you to possess developed and trained will power. You know from your own experience and observation that to have a strong will is to be a strong individual, one who is regarded with respect. You know also that to have a weak will is to be a weak individual, one to be pitied, if not indeed to be scorned. You may, however, have fallen into the error of supposing that the possessors of the strong will are individuals especially favored and blessed by nature, or by the powers above nature. You may be among those who regard strength of will as akin to height, complexion, or similar personal characteristics which have been bestowed upon certain individuals without any effort on their part, and to which no other individuals may hope to attain if they have not been born with them. If you have fallen into this error, now is the time for you to rid yourself of it. Thoughtful psychologists take an entirely different view of the case. While recognizing the fact that to some individuals the manifestation of willpower is easier at the beginning, that it comes more natural to some than to others, those who have made a careful study of this subject know that it is equally true that each and every individual has within himself a bountiful supply of latent willpower which he may develop and train to a marvelous degree if he will employ the proper scientific methods. In fact, experience has proved that many of the individuals who have thus acquired a high degree of willpower are able to manifest it more consistently and more habitually than many of those who were born to it, but who have not learned how to apply it effectively. It is true that in order to develop and train your willpower you will need to arouse and apply a certain degree of will itself. You will also find that your willpower once set into operation in this direction will rise to the occasion, and that your supply of such power will prove to be equal to your demands upon it. One may start with even a far less degree of willpower than that possessed by the average man, and then proceed step by step in an ever-increasing ratio of attainment and development until the heights are reached. Accompanying the very application of willpower to the task of developing itself by special training, there is a correlated arousing of its latent energies. The employment of willpower in this effort tends to strengthen and energize its power of manifestation in other directions. We ask you to take careful notice of this peculiar situation. Willpower may be developed and trained only by willpower. Willpower is required to develop and to train willpower. Willpower is self-developed and self-trained. Willpower applies its energies to itself, and by means of this it tends to perfect and improve itself. The other mental faculties and powers find it necessary to call on willpower to perfect them, but willpower requires no outside aid, and can obtain none. It must ever fall back upon its own inherent powers when it wishes to develop or improve itself. If you had no willpower, you would never be able to develop any, since you would have nothing else with which to develop it. But, fortunately, you have will to start with, though it may exist merely in a latent or dormant state. Willpower is your heritage, and it will be at your service if you demand it. When you employ willpower to develop willpower, you not only build a mental path over which the will thereafter travels, but you also actually strengthen and develop the will itself by the very task of building such paths or roads. In creating the tools for the use of the will, you also render the will itself stronger, better and more efficient. Here we have a striking illustration of the old biblical statement that, "To him who hath shall be given." The more persistent and the longer continue the efforts of your will to develop and train your willpower, the stronger will your will become by reason of the energies expended in the effort. By employing willpower in the task, you will actually gain willpower as the result. This is a very significant fact, and one which you should always bear in mind. The more of will you give, the more of will you have. This is the way of the will. Here at the very beginning, you should realize that there is no royal road to the development and training of willpower. There is no magic charm which when worn will transform the weak-willed individual into the strong-willed one. There is no miraculous drug, concealed in an attractive capsule, which needs but to be swallowed by one in order to render himself a veritable Samson of willpower, or a Napoleon of will. There is no magician's wand which when waved over the individual may transform him in the twinkling of an eye into the man with the will of the Titan. Those who have dreamed of such a miraculous and magic process of transformation may as well realize these facts, right here at the beginning. But equally true is it that the wonderful results which many have dreamed of securing by some kind of miraculous or magic power are possible of attainment by you, provided that you will apply yourself to the task in the right spirit and with a firm determination to succeed. You may obtain the highest success in this direction, but you must work for it just as you must work for anything else worthwhile in life. Just as you may develop yourself physically by exercise along the lines of scientific physical culture, so you may develop your willpower by scientific methods and exercises. This, indeed, is the only way. Willpower may be obtained in no other way. But, on the other hand, the reward will far more than repay you for your efforts. Moreover, once you have taken the first few steps, you will find that your interest will increase, and you will be encouraged by the many little indications of the actual development of willpower which will make themselves manifest even from the start. We would here call your attention to another important and interesting fact concerning the task of the development and training of willpower. While the discipline and exercise of the task entails some degree of self-sacrifice in the direction of setting aside certain minor courses of action which may have a strong basis of habit, you will find yourself more than compensated for the loss by the pleasure which comes from the consciousness of the unfoldment of new powers within yourself. The new interests will soon supplant the old ones, and the joy of possession will overbalance the price of denial. In this connection, we would impress upon you the fact that no intelligent application of willpower is a loss, such is always a gain. In every intelligent exercise or application of the will you are making an investment in willpower, you are making a deposit in the bank of will, and this bank pays at attractive rate of interest. We know of no better investment for you. Your expenditures are transformed into savings stored up as a reserve fund drawing good interest. This surely should prove an attractive proposition for you. We take it that you have already developed at least the average degree of willpower. The fact that you have undertaken the study of this book is evidence that you have developed at least some degree of the will to will, that you know what a valuable thing willpower is, and that you desire to possess and manifest still more of it. We are proceeding upon such assumption, even when we may seem to be giving instruction designed for those of a lesser degree of attainment. Do not make the mistake of passing over any of the simple and elementary phases of our instruction merely because you may think that you have passed beyond that stage, and have outgrown the need for such instruction. The rule is this: that which will make a weak will strong, will make a strong will stronger. Even the most elementary method or exercise may be employed profitably by those of giant willpower, particularly where the strength has not been effectively trained or efficiently directed. If you are seeking by the methods of this book to direct the efforts of some weaker-willed friend or relation, we would say to you that you are on the right road. There are no exceptions to the rule that willpower is capable of development and training in the case of any individual. While there is will, there is hope. There is latent will in everyone, even in the weakest-willed person. Moreover, those who are suffering from a diseased will, or from a discouraged will, may feel certain that the right effort will raise them from their unfortunate condition. There lives no man to whom the benefit of will culture is denied. There is no man so weak, so old, so burdened with a long series of will failures, to whom it may not be said truthfully that the gate of hope is still open to you. Enter into your own kingdom of awakened will. Now, right here at the beginning of our instruction, we shall ask you to recall an experience of your youth. If you have ever lived in the country, you will understand the principle involved therein. We allude to the process whereby the good old pump on the farm was set a-going, by means of the process of priming it, i.e., of pouring into the pump a pailful of water in order to set into operation the internal mechanism whereby the working of the pump handle brought up to the spout a free and full supply of water. Now, then, here at this point we are going to ask you to prime your good pump of willpower, in order to set it a-going. Later, you will find some good suggestions concerning that which you should pour into the pump of willpower in the process of priming it. Pour these in, and before long you will feel the thrill of the mounting willpower, the will to will. Priming the pump of willpower. Begin by realizing just how much you really want to attain strong and effective willpower. Let the feelings of your subconscious mentality rise to the surface of your consciousness. You will discover that you have some very strong feelings on the subject. Give to these feelings the full possession of your mind. Let the desire for willpower permeate your whole being. Do not rest satisfied until you want willpower as the drowning man wants air, as the starving man wants food, as the thirsting man wants water, as the wild creature wants its mate, as the mother creature wants its young. Before you can get anything you must want it hard enough. 2. Picture yourself in imagination as already possessed of strong willpower. See yourself, in mental pictures, as manifesting the actions of the man of giant will. See yourself as the man of invincible determination, of the purpose once fixed, and then victory or death. See yourself as the man possessed of that strong and indefatigable will which treads down difficulties and dangers as the boy treads down the frozen snow in winter. See yourself as possessed of that settled purpose which demands fulfillment, and which will not be denied. See yourself as possessed of that passionate and unwearied will which performs that which seems impossible to the eyes of the cold and feeble. See yourself as the man who will not yield to the casualties of life, but who forces them to yield to him, and who compels circumstances to serve his purposes and designs, though they had at first seemed determined to frustrate them. See yourself as possessed of that spirit of will, that firm, decisive spirit, which clears a space around you, and leaves you room and freedom for action. Memorize and ponder over the following lines from Ella Wheeler Wilcox. There is no chance, no destiny, no fate can circumvent, or hinder, or control the firm resolve of a determined soul. Gifts count for nothing, will alone is great. All things give way before it soon or late. What obstacles can stay the mighty force of the sea-seeking river in its course, or cause the ascending orb of day to wait? Each well-born soul must win what it deserves. Let the fools prate of luck. The fortunate is he whose earnest purpose never swerves, whose slightest action, or inaction, serves the one great aim. Why, even death itself stands still and waits an hour sometimes for such a will. 3. Next, carefully consider the question of whether or not you are ready and willing to pay the price of effort, exercise and training necessary for the attainment of strong will power. Proceed honestly in this matter, do not try to deceive yourself. Weigh carefully the advantages which will accrue to you as the result of your attainment of the qualities and powers seen in the mental picture which you have just considered. Against these balance the degree of work, time, attention, and the general mental discipline which you must perform as the price of your attainment. Balance the goods against the price, and decide whether or not you will get full value for your money. You must settle this question once and for all, right here at the beginning. You must not carry it over into the later stages of this instruction, there to plague and torment you. If you find that you are not willing to pay the price, all well and good. In such case close this book and dismiss the subject from your mind, leave it for some more courageous and determined soul. But if, as we anticipate, you decide that the game is worth the candle, and the goods are cheap at the price, then close the contract with yourself, and proceed as follows. Having fully made up your mind, you should proceed to enter into the task of will development with full determination and resolute purpose. You must manifest not a mere passive or lukewarm resolve, but a real, red-blooded, virile resolution, which your manhood compels you to fulfill. You must will to will in this matter. You must throw the whole force of your being into the task of this purposeful determination. You must be prepared to act now in the manner in which you pictured yourself acting a few moments ago. You must burn your bridges behind you, and must enter upon the road from which there is no retreat. Take as your battle cry, I can, I will, I dare, I do. Carry its inspiration with you. In your hours of struggle, effort, and battle against the forces of lethargy, apathy, inertia, and the tendency to side-track the decision, sound this note insistently and persistently. In your hours of discouragement, in which the tempter whispers in your ear, what's the use, set the vibrations of the battle cry into motion. And, finally, in your hours of triumph, in which you enjoy your achievement with that keen pleasure that comes only to him who has overcome obstacles by sheer persistence, determination and will, let this be your vibrant note of victory. Sound this note over and over again, until its vibrations energize every atom and cell of your being. Let its rhythm awaken the thrill of willpower within you, until the I can, I will, I dare, I do, sounds from the very center of your being. Sound it over and over again, until you are fully conscious that its vibrations have begun, and that the whole mighty structure of your being is quivering and thrilling, throbbing and beating, with the rhythmic vibration of the energy of your persistent determination, the spirit of your awakened will to will. This, then, is the water of suggestive idea and mental imagery, of definite course and determined purpose, which you are pouring into your pump of will so as to prime it and to set it a-going, and, set it a-going, it surely will. The nature of will. Psychology finds itself confronted by a paradox when it undertakes the consideration of the will. While it is able to indicate clearly the several stages of the activity of will, and also to point out positively the methods whereby the will may be developed and trained, yet when it seeks to indicate the essential nature of will it finds itself baffled at every turn and, in the end, is compelled to content itself with explaining the will by a recital of its activities. The will is elusive. When we think that we have pinned it down for an examination of its essential nature, we find that we have merely laid hold of one of its manifold phases of activity. The will in itself remains free from our confining instruments, defying us to fasten it down even by a satisfactory definition. Compared with the knowledge we have of the fundamental nature of the emotions, the reason, the memory, and the imagination, our knowledge of the essential nature of will is very unsatisfactory. Yet, at the same time, we know that we have a will and that we will, and, moreover, we know how to train our will and how to develop and unfold its power. We have but to attempt to define the will, even with the aid of the best dictionaries, in order to realize how far beyond all possible definitions of it is our intuitive and direct knowledge of its presence, its powers, its activities. Turning to the dictionaries, we find that will is defined as the power of the mind which enables a person to choose between two courses of action, also, the actual exercise of the power of choice, and, in a secondary meaning, strong wish or inclination, desire or conative feeling. The dictionaries further inform us that the power of choice is the distinctive attribute of will, and that the exercise of that power is more properly called volition. Now, this definition is not in accord with the fuller conception of the term will, which most of us entertain. Moreover, it is not in full accord with the teaching of the best modern psychology. Most of us, when we employ the term will, have in mind the exercise of the strong purposeful, determined power of the ego or I am I. We know that within ourselves is a strong dynamic force, which when applied with a set and determined purpose is capable of acting with tremendous force, overcoming obstacles, breaking barriers, and sweeping away opposition. Moreover, the best modern psychology informs us that will always is concerned with action, and that without action there is no completed process of will. In the present book we shall consider will as being essentially concerned with action, and as being most characteristically manifested in the mental states which we know as purpose and determination, respectively. All the other phases of will we shall regard as being merely incidental to this phase of purposeful determination, and as contributing to such phase. By following this course, we believe we shall be emphasizing the practical aspect of will power, and that we shall be keeping the inquiry and instruction in the channel promising the greatest benefit to you in the accomplishment of your ends and aims, your ambitions and your hopes. The term, purpose, seems to express satisfactorily this understanding and conception of will. It is defined as the view, aim, design, intention, determination, resolution or will to accomplish or reach some particular object. Another definition is that which a person sets before himself as the object to be gained or accomplished, the end or aim which one has in view in any plan, measure or exertion, that which one intends to do, hence his intention, design, plan or project. Employed as a verb, the term, purpose, is defined as, to intend, to design, to determine or resolve on anything as an end or object to be gained or accomplished. The term, determination, in this particular meaning, is defined as, strength or firmness of mind, firm resolve or resolution, an absolute direction to a certain end. In the mental state of purposeful determination, and in its resultant action, we have at least a working principle of the phase of will power with which we are vitally concerned in this book. We shall consider and apply the principles of the other phases of will toward the end of the accomplishment of this purposeful determination phase of will power. We ask you to fix this principle in your mind, and to keep it in view throughout the entire course of this inquiry and instruction. Memorize the term, purposeful determination. We have thought it well to present to you at this point a brief and general synopsis of the 5 stages of will, the stages which each and every process of will manifests as it unfolds into active expression. The more clearly you understand the processes of will, the more clearly will you be able to will. These 5 stages of will are as follows: 1. Feeling and emotion, 2. Desire and impulse, 3. Deliberation and consideration, 4. Determination and decision, 5. Voluntary expression and action. Here follows a brief description of each of the above stated 5 stages of will. 1. The stage of feeling and emotion. Feeling is defined as the simple agreeable or disagreeable side of any mental state. Emotion is the complex of feeling. Feeling is the indispensable element of all emotional states. While feeling, in itself, is not to be regarded as a phase or aspect of perfected will, yet it is true that feeling is one of the raw materials of will action. Or, stating it in another form, all will activities have their roots embedded in the soil of feeling and emotion. This fact is not generally recognized by the average person, but it is one which everyone is forced to admit when he analyzes and examines his will processes. In the category of feeling and emotion we, of course, include the moral and religious feelings and emotions, as well as each and every other form or forms of feeling and emotion. It has well been said that the phenomena of the world have value to us only in so far as they affect our feelings. The importance of this is recognized when we realize that all will activities proceed from desire, and that desire is but the active aspect or phase of feeling. We will to do only what we desire to do, and we desire to do only what our feelings report as comfortable, satisfying and contenting, rather than the opposite. If an object or subject fails to arouse interest and agreeable feelings, if it thus possesses no interest or attraction for us, then we experience no desire or impulse to have or to do anything concerning the attainment of that object or subject. If we have no aversion or repulsion, also phases of feeling, concerning a subject or object, then we experience no desire or impulse to avoid or escape, or to get rid of or away from, that subject or object. Without agreeable or disagreeable feelings or interest concerning any particular thing, we have no desire or impulse to act in any way concerning or relating to that thing, it has no will value for us in such case. If feeling and emotion were eliminated from our mental being, then all things alike would prove absolutely uninteresting to us. In such case, in the familiar phrase, all things would look alike to us, we should not want any of them, nor should we want to take any action toward attaining any of them. Likewise, we should not dislike any of them, nor should we want to take any action in the direction of escaping, avoiding, or getting away from anything whatsoever. In such case, our will would be so absolutely passive and inert that it might as well be non-existent. 2. The stage of desire and impulse. The essential active element of desire and impulse is that which in psychology is called conation, which is defined as that element of consciousness which shows itself in tendencies, impulses, desires and acts of volition. It is essentially a mental state of unrest, and it manifests whenever a mental state tends by its nature to develop into something else. Desire is defined as a conative tendency toward that which promises emotional satisfaction and content, or else away from that which threatens emotional dissatisfaction and discontent. Desire has for its object the satisfaction of some form of pleasurable feeling, or the escape from some form of painful feeling. This pleasurable feeling, or painful feeling, however, may be concerned with either a. immediate, or b. remote events. Likewise, such events may concern either c. the individual himself, or d. others in whom he is interested and to whom he is related by the bonds of affection or sympathy. No matter how complex may be the feelings arousing the conative impulses of desire, their ultimate analysis will show that the basic feeling is that inspired by some promised pleasure or some threatened pain, immediate or remote, direct or indirect, deemed likely to be experienced by the individual. Desire is the connecting link between feeling and will. On one side it is blended with feeling, on the other side it blends into will. It depends for existence upon feeling, it depends for expression upon will. Desire always manifests by a more or less definite want or want to, this accompanied by a peculiar feeling of tension or strain, known as impulse. The stronger the desire, the stronger is this tension or strain of impulse, this conative urge toward action. Feeling and emotion inspiring desire may manifest on the open plane of consciousness, or, again, they may abide more or less concealed in the recesses of the subconscious mentality, or, again, they may exist in the guise of habit. But wherever they exist or abide, or in whatever form or guise they present themselves, they are always feeling and emotion in the stage of transformation into the conative energy of desire, and striving to escape and find release in voluntary action of the will. 3. The stage of deliberation and consideration. Deliberation is the act of deliberating or weighing in the mind. In this stage you find yourself confronted with several alternative courses of action, or else with the question, to do or not to do some particular thing. In each and every instance of deliberation, however, you will find that each alternative course of action will involve certain phases of desire, i.e., certain tendencies to attain or to secure something promising emotional satisfaction and content, or else to escape from and to avoid something threatening emotional dissatisfaction and discontent. These alternative appeals of desire too will present conflicting emotional attractions or repulsions, or both, these you weigh one against the other, one set against the other, until finally you strike the balance of decision. In such cases, you will find yourself, figuratively speaking, tasting these several dishes of emotional food, noting the agreeable or disagreeable qualities of each, and endeavoring to decide which promises the greater degree of emotional satisfaction or dissatisfaction, content or discontent. The fact that in this process of deliberation you call upon reason, memory, imagination and other mental powers or faculties, to assist you in your decision, must not cause you to overlook the all-important part played in it by desire. You will find that in the end you have decided upon the course of action which promises you the greatest emotional content and comfort, and the least emotional dissatisfaction and discomfort. You have employed reason, and its assistant faculties and powers, merely to enable you to discover which of the alternatives possesses the greater promise of ultimate and permanent emotional value along the lines of content and comfort. Your reasons governing your decision concerning will action are always found to be based upon motives of this particular kind. 4. The stage of determination and decision. Determination, in this usage, is the act of terminating or bringing to an end, the state of decision. In this stage, the processes of deliberation, or the weighing of motives, is brought to an end, and the mind is made up. The old school of psychology held this to be the last and final act of will, its characteristic act. This, indeed, would be true if we could accept the old definition of will as the faculty which chooses or makes choice, but under the later conceptions and definitions of will, in which it is perceived that will is essentially concerned with action, we see the necessity of pursuing our inquiry further. There is a marked difference between the usage of merely making up your mind, or of even deciding to act, and that of the actual performance of the associated action which you have decided to perform. Many a time you have made up your mind, and have decided to act, only later to fail to act or to carry out your decision. This distinction is illustrated by William James' familiar story of the man making up his mind, and deciding to get out of bed on a cold morning when the alarm clock sounded. Frequently he finds it necessary to make up his mind, and to decide several times before he finally expresses the thought in action. In this inquiry and instruction, accordingly, we have taken cognizance of that further phase of determination which is defined as strength and firmness of mind, firm resolve or resolution, absolute direction to a certain end. In this phase of the stage of determination, you reach the process of purposeful determination. Here the stage of determination blends into that of voluntary action, and becomes one with it. 5. The stage of voluntary expression and action. Voluntary action is defined as the process of acting and moving by willpower. This is the final stage of the will. It is will in full flower. It is toward this end that will has been struggling and striving, which effort has given activity to all of the processes of the preceding stages or phases of will. Voluntary action is the very spirit of will. Without the manifestation of voluntary action, the will process is practically incomplete. Determination is the decision to will, or, in its more active phases, the resolve or resolution, the purposeful determination to will, or, in still more intense manifestation, even the will to will, itself. But in voluntary action we have what has been called will willing itself in action, and manifesting itself as will. Here the trigger of the will has been pulled by the I am I. Here the spring of action has been released. Here the will drives itself into action, sets itself to work. Here the will not only wills to will, but also actually wills itself into full manifestation and expression. Here we have the real will expressing its purpose, its determination, and its full power and inner nature. This is the phase of will that so eludes our definition in formal terms, because we have no terms, other than those of will itself, with which to define it. In the previous phases or stages we could employ the terms of feeling, desire or reason in striving to indicate the nature of the processes of such stages or phases, but here we have nothing else with which to compare will, for there is nothing else of its kind. Will is unique, sui generis, alone in its class, in a class by itself. You cannot hope to apprehend intellectually its essential nature, but you can and do know it, and experience it within yourself, as the closest instrument, implement and power of the I am I, the ego, the self. Expression and inhibition. There are two general phases or forms of voluntary action with which you must become acquainted. The first phase or form is that of expression. Here the will action proceeds in the direction of the actual expression and manifestation of the mental states animating and inspiring the will. The second phase or form is that of inhibition. Here the will action proceeds in the direction of checking, restraining, keeping back or inhibiting the expression of certain insistent but objectionable mental states seeking to inspire the will to action. Here the effort is exerted in response to the stronger, opposing mental states which have won in the will conflict during the stage of deliberation and decision. In inhibition, the will is employed for the purpose of binding, locking up and restraining the activity of the defeated set of desires which repeatedly present themselves in an attempt to reverse the former decision of the will. Many regard the phase of expression as the characteristic activity of voluntary action, and from one point of view this is correct. But you should never lose sight of the fact that the man who can and will manifest the phase of inhibition, when necessity arises, and wisdom dictates such course, is none the less the man of giant will power. In fact, the man of the strong will usually accomplishes his great results of expression only after he has manifested inhibition in the direction of refraining from acting upon many very strong impulses and desires which are opposed to his top values of will. In many cases, indeed, one employs in inhibition a degree of will power not less than that required in the processes of expression. It often is quite as hard not to do a thing, as it is to do a thing. The man of purposeful determination and will power achieves his distinction very largely by reason of the fact that he is able to hold before his mental vision one ideal, or set of ideals, one set of prime motives, one set purpose, one top value, and then resolutely and determinately, even ruthlessly, to thrust from his region of will all conflicting and opposing tendencies and desires, inclinations and impulses, urges and cravings. In order to manifest into action the one great ideal, such a man finds it necessary to inhibit and to restrain a host of lesser ideas, desires, inclinations, urges and cravings. In order to accomplish some one great thing, you will often find it necessary not to do many other things which conflict with and oppose that one great thing. In the exercises which form a part of this instruction, you will be asked to manifest this phase of inhibition by will power. By doing so, you will make progress in the attainment of the giant will. This not necessarily because of any special demerit or evil in the inhibited desires and actions, but simply and solely because by reason of such deliberate and determined action of the will you may develop will muscle, and may learn how to hold fast the fiery steeds of desire which are pulling your chariot of will. The steeds of desire serve well their rightful purposes when they are held well in hand, but, unrestrained, they frequently run away, and end by overturning the chariot and perhaps destroying the driver. Their training consists of alternative stimulation and inhibition, deliberately and determinately devised and executed. The purpose of the training is that, through actual practice and exercise, the fiber of your will shall be made strong and firm, tough and tenacious. By training your desire nature to submit to the control of the will intelligently applied, and by training your will to control intelligently your desire nature, you not only develop the art of efficient voluntary action, but also train the desire nature to exert to the full its wonderful powers, or else to withhold its forces when the object of the purposeful determination is best served by such restraint. Expression and inhibition are the two great levers of your machinery of will. Acquire the art of employing each efficiently and effectively, under the guidance and direction of your reason, and in the service of your prime motives, your top values, your great ideals. Conative Will. In your task of developing and training your will power you must carefully acquaint yourself with each and every one of the several stages or phases of will, to the end that you may master each particular phase in turn. In order to acquire complete control over your processes of willing, you must master each of the phases of the general activity involved in them. You must attack the subject in detail, conquering each of the phases or divisions in turn. When you have made this conquest of the several divisions or phases, you will find that you have made a conquest of the whole. If you have failed heretofore to attain the conquest of will power, you will probably find that your failure has resulted from the fact that you have made the mistake of attempting a frontal attack upon the opposing army, directing your attack upon its strongest point where it is able to bring to bear upon you the maximum of its defensive strength. Such attempts usually result in defeat. The true general attacks the flanks of the enemy, cutting off his bases of supply, and then defeating him in detail. This method of attack is the plan which in this book we shall advise you to follow. We will teach you how to gain control of the bases of supplies, and then how to attack one flank after another until you have gained the control and mastery of the entire organized forces of will power. Having accomplished this, you may then press these captured forces into your own service, causing them to fight for you instead of against you. You should begin your attack upon that wing of the army of will which may be called the general phase of conative will. In this category we include the feeling and desire phases of will which have been indicated in the preceding section of this book. Conation is defined as that element of our mental states which shows itself in tendencies, impulses, desires and acts of volition. Conation essentially is unrest. It exists when and so far as an existing mental state tends by its nature to develop into something else. Conation manifests itself in an attempt, an endeavor, a striving to attain something of which the idea or mental image exists in consciousness or subconsciousness. A typical instance is that effort of the memory to recall a name which has escaped recollection for the moment. It is, on the mental plane, akin to that which on the physical plane is manifested as muscular strain arising from contraction of the muscles, plus a feeling of pleasantness or unpleasantness, as the case may be. A leading reference work says, conation is common to desire, yearning, longing, craving, wishing and willing, indeed to all states of consciousness which have an inherent tendency to pass beyond themselves. In desire, consciousness endeavors to pass from the want of an object to the possession thereof, or, if an unpleasantly toned idea enters consciousness, say the idea of an embarrassing situation, a conation arises, and consciousness makes a forcible effort to eject the unpleasant idea. Conation is that mental state in which the feeling element of desire tends to transform itself into the element of will, where it transforms the I want or I want to into I do. It follows the rule of desire which causes the movement toward the object or condition promising the greater emotional satisfaction and content, and away from the object or condition threatening the greater emotional dissatisfaction and discontent. Will arises from affection, affection arises from emotion and feeling. Affection says, I like, desire says, I want, or I want to, and will says, I do. In order to understand conative will, you must first understand and control the feelings, emotions, and affections from which conative will springs. Very few persons realize that feeling, emotion, affection and desire are really phases of will. Psychology, however, informs us that the conative will is the supply department of the army of willpower, that it is the branch of the willpower organization which supplies the active branches of the service with the material with which they work, and without which they cannot manifest activity. It is very important for you to realize this fact fully, since you must begin your work of developing and training the will by acquiring control over the processes of the feelings, emotions, affections and desires which go to make up that which is called conative will. You are familiar with the praise accorded to the strong will, but very likely you are not quite so familiar with the fact that under the surface of that valuable mental quality in power there must always exist a strong, ardent, insistent and persistent desire. Without strong, ardent, insistent desire, even the strongest will fail to be called into action. Well has it been said that desire is the flame, the heat of which generates the steam of will. The men of the strong will are almost always found to be men of strong desire. What is called aspiration and ambition is really merely a special form of strong desire, given definite form and direction by idea. Likewise, all forms of religious or spiritual craving, or moral aspirations, are forms of desire. Nearly everyone believes that he has desire well developed within his being, but, as a matter of fact, very few persons have even begun to realize just what desire really is. The great masses of persons believe desire to be merely the faint, colorless, wanting, or the equally gentle, mild, wishing, which represents the extent of their development of conative will. They usually have not even the most remote idea of what it means, or feels like, to be filled with that eager, longing, craving, ravenous desire which expresses itself in an insistent demand for the desired object or condition, and not in a mere wishing for it, or perhaps even longing for it. Such persons have no conception or experience of what it is to want a thing as fiercely, insistently, persistently, ardently, overwhelmingly, and vitally as the drowning man wants a breath of air, as the shipwrecked or desert-lost man wants a drink of water, as the famished man wants food, as the fierce, wild creature wants its mate, as the mother wants the welfare of her young. Until they know by actual experience what it feels like to want in this way, they do not know what desire really is. You will note that we repeatedly employ the above illustration of insistent desire in this instruction. We do so purposely, that its repetition will stamp it indelibly upon your mind. But those individuals of the race who have accomplished great things, those great masters of circumstance, those great directors of fate, along all lines of human life and endeavor, men like Caesar, Napoleon, and other men like them in less prominent places in life, these men know full well what it means to experience this fierce, elemental thirst of desire, and their strong will power has been aroused into action, and maintained in persistent and determined action, by the elemental force thus set into manifestation and expression. Such men and women act upon the principle that you may have anything you want, provided that you want it hard enough, and they begin by wanting it hard enough. The failure of many persons is originally caused by their lack of the power to want things hard enough. When you learn to want a thing hard enough, you will have taken the second great step on the path of attainment, which is mounted by the energy of willpower. The first step is that of knowing just what you want, definite ideals and insistent desire. These, with will, are the prerequisites of persistent determination. Desire supplies the motives for all action of the will. Without these motives the will would not proceed to action at all, in any direction whatsoever. If you had no desire concerning a particular thing, then you would not manifest will activity toward or away from that particular thing. In such case, you would remain perfectly neutral and passive in your attitude toward that thing. This holds good concerning your mental attitude and action toward or away from anything, or everything. The general rule concerning the effect and influence of desire upon will activity is as follows: you always act in the direction which at that particular moment of consciousness seems to promise the greatest degree of emotional satisfaction and content, or which threatens the least degree of emotional dissatisfaction or discontent, the promise or threat being either direct or indirect, immediate or remote in time and place. This rule holds good even when you act to relinquish an immediate or present good in favor of a future or remote good, also when you relinquish a present good because of the fear of some unpleasant remote or future consequence of the action. In all cases you will find that your actions are based upon the rule that one always seeks that which will bring him pleasure, or get rid of pain, immediate or remote, for oneself or for others to whom he is bound by ties of sympathy or affection. This pleasure or pain may be on the planes of physical, mental, moral, or spiritual emotional feeling, respectively. The principle applies to all planes of emotional activity and manifestation. The technical rule of psychology concerning will action is as follows: the will proceeds to action along the lines of the strongest motives present and active, in thought and in feeling, at the moment of the action. In considering this rule, you must always remember that the motive always is to be found in feeling, emotion, or affection, raised to the conative plane of desire, this being more or less influenced and directed by reason. Reason, intellect, memory and imagination, however, serve merely as the directors and aids to the desire element of will in such cases. At the last, they are seen but to serve to point out the road over which the strongest desires may travel most efficiently and successfully, and whereby undesirable consequences may be avoided. They indicate merely the how, and the direction, whereby the desire may be most effectively and fully satisfied. The realization of this absolute but comparatively little known rule concerning will action brings us to some startling logical conclusions when we seek to reason out the matter to its end. We then see that our highest and most unselfish, as well as our lowest and most selfish actions are performed under this same rule. You must not for a moment fall into the error of identifying desire with merely the unworthy examples of that mental state. On the contrary, the very highest aims, aspirations, ambitions and striving toward high ideals are likewise in the category of desire. Anything that we wish to do, want to do, or strive to do, high or low, egoistic or altruistic, moral or immoral, social or unsocial, commendable or reprehensible, material or spiritual, all these are forms of desire based upon feeling, emotion, affection. The highest morality is that based upon the strong feeling, emotion, affection and desire to live a moral life, which satisfies and contents the spirit, rather than upon fear, or the mere wish to be well regarded by other persons and to meet with popular approval. But, here, you must not fall into the error or fallacy of believing that man is a mere automaton moved hither and thither by desire, or as a mere helpless slave of desire. While it is true that you act by and through your will, and that desire is the motive of will activity, it likewise is true that by the introduction of ideas and ideals even desire is given form and direction, strength and power toward a definite end. By means of the scientific introduction of ideas and ideals you may give to any form, phase, aspect or mode of desire and feeling a degree of strength and power which it did not possess previously. In such cases your will wills that desire shall be in accordance with will, it wills that it shall be supplied with the right kind of desire power which is required in order to call into activity the needed degree of will power. The untrained will is like a stream flowing through a channel dug for it by others. The trained will, on the contrary, first digs its own channel and then flows through its self-imposed, self-limited banks and walls. It is self-limited, and, at the last, self-directed. Keen reasoners, at this point, sometimes object that even in such cases will is moved by desire in some form or degree. Such reasoners hold that all that the will accomplishes in such cases is to master one set of feelings and desires in favor of a higher and more dominant set. This is close reasoning, it is logically correct and has never been successfully controverted. But, even so, the principle of the control of desire by the will remains undisturbed, so far as is concerned its pragmatic and practical application. While you may never expect to escape the influence of desire, even in your highest will activities, yet you may stand upon the high position of the dominant will, and from that position may control, stimulate, weaken, encourage or depress the power of the lower forms of desire and feeling. In fact, when you reach the heights of will power, you will find that the element of desire seems almost to blend into the essential element of will itself, almost to become identical with it. In such cases, you will be forced to the conscious conviction that here, at the last, you have ceased merely to desire to will, and instead have reached the point where you are able to will. Be the metaphysical theory whatever it may, the fact remains that to him who has climbed the heights of will there sooner or later comes this supreme report of consciousness of the freedom of the ultimate will. But such heights are reached only by those individuals who have paid the price of attainment, who have persistently climbed the steep mountain paths of will power, and have at last reached the clear space at the top. Such experiences are unknown to the great masses of the people. The average person is practically the slave of his desire, usually of his cruder and most primitive ones. He does not understand even the first principles of the mastery of desire by the dominant will. The great mass of persons are will slaves, there are but few real will masters. Here, in a nutshell, is the distinction between the will slave and the will master. The average person is moved to will activity by the forces of feeling, affection and desire, the strongest desire motive always winning the day. Those who have arrived at a scientific understanding of the subject, however, know that while it is true that the strongest desire always wins the battle, nevertheless, it is equally true that the strength of feeling, affection and desire is directly proportionate to the strength of the ideas or ideals animating it. Consequently, by the skillful employment of attention, itself one of the principal weapons of will, in the direction of holding in consciousness a certain set of ideas or ideals, one may cause these ideas or ideals to energize the set of feelings and desires associated with them, and at the same time to weaken the opposite set of feelings and desires. By the control of the attention, the I, through the will, is able to control feeling and desire, to make them act as his servants, and thus to attain to the mastery of will. By the scientific employment of ideas and ideals, through the attention, you may control, direct, and master the activities of the conative will. But, as we have said, the average person has not even the faintest glimmering of this truth, and, as a consequence, such person remains throughout his life a will slave instead of becoming a will master. It is an axiom of psychology that, the degree of force, energy, will, determination, persistence, and continuous application manifested by an individual in his aspirations, ambitions, aims, performances, actions and work is determined primarily by the degree of his desire for the attainment of his objects, his degree of want and want to concerning those objects. This is the more technical statement of the principle embodied in the aphorism which has been previously quoted to you, i.e., desire is the flame that produces the steam of will, the logical inference being that when you wish to produce and use the steam of will you must first supply the full flame of desire. In that book of this series entitled Desire Power, we have considered in close detail the subject of desire in its relation to other forms and phases of personal power, including the phase of will power. In it we have drawn upon familiar human experience, and upon the facts of natural history concerning animal life, for the purpose of illustrating the nature and character of desire regarded as the motive power of will activity, etc. The following paragraph, marked by quotation marks, reproduced from the pages of the book referred to, follows the presentation of those illustrations. We advise you to study carefully the principle announced therein, and to commit to memory the spirit of those principles, as expressed in the master formula of attainment, as follows: you may have anything you want, provided that you, 1. Know exactly what you want. 2. Want it hard enough. 3. Confidently expect to obtain it. 4. Persistently determined to obtain it, and 5. Are willing to pay the price of its attainment. We have called your attention to the above examples and illustrations of the force of strongly aroused elemental emotions and desires, not alone to point out to you how strong such feelings, emotions and desires become under the appropriate circumstances and conditions, but also to bring you to a realization of the existence within all living things of a latent emotional strength and power which is capable of being aroused into strenuous activity under the proper stimulus, and directed toward certain definite ends and purposes indicated by that stimulus. That this strength and power is aroused by, and flows out toward, the particular forms of stimulus above indicated is a matter of common knowledge. But that it may be aroused to equal strength, power and intensity by other forms of stimulus, such stimulus having been deliberately placed before it by the individual, is not known to the many, only the few have learned this secret. The method, above referred to, whereby the latent desire power may be aroused and stimulated by the presentation to it of the stimulus of suggestive and inciting ideas and mental pictures, is based upon the following psychological principle: desire is aroused and flows forth toward things represented by suggestive ideas and mental pictures. The stronger and clearer the suggestive idea or mental picture, the stronger and more insistent is the aroused desire, all else being equal. The knowledge of and the application of this principle renders you the master of desire instead of the slave of desire, the latter condition and state being that of the great multitude of persons who have not learned the secret of the mastery of desire. The following quotation from Professor Halleck will serve to illustrate the principle involved in the process of the employment of the power of attention in the direction of presenting to desire the stimulus of suggestive ideas and mental images in order to more fully arouse and to further strengthen the feeling and conative tendency. Halleck says, "The first step in the development of the will lies in the exercise of attention. There is a sense of effort in voluntary attention. Ideas grow in distinctness and in motor power as we attend to them. If we take two ideas of the same intensity and center the attention upon one, we shall notice how much it grows in power. Take the sensations from two aches in the body and fix attention upon those of one of them. That idea will grow in motor power until we may act in a direction supposed to relieve that special pain, while the other is comparatively neglected. If we, at the start, want several things in about an equal degree, whether a bicycle, a typewriter, or a cyclopedia, we shall end by wanting that the most on which our attention has been most strongly centered. The bicycle idea may thus gain more motor power than either of the two other, or, if we keep thinking how useful a cyclopedia would be, action may tend in that direction. We may state as a law the fact that the will determines which motive shall become the strongest, by determining which ideas shall occupy the field of consciousness. Every idea which becomes an object of desire is a motive. It is true that the will tends to go out in the direction of the greatest motive, that is, toward the object which seems most desirable, but the will, through voluntary attention, puts energy into a motive idea and thus makes it strong. It is impossible to center the attention long upon an idea, without developing positive or negative interest, attraction or repulsion. Thus does the will develop motives. We have seen that emotion and desire arise in the presence of ideas, and that the will has influence in detaining or banishing a given idea. If one idea is kept before the mind, a desire and strong motive may gather around that idea. If another idea is called in, the power of the first will decline. The more Macbeth and his wife held before themselves the idea of the fame and power which the throne would confer upon them, the stronger became the desire to kill the king, until it finally grew too strong to be mastered. They were, however, responsible for nursing the desire. Had they resolutely thought of something else, the desire would have been weakened. The suggestive ideas and mental pictures, which we have urged you to employ in order to arouse and heighten the vigor and power of desire, are as follows: suggestive ideas and mental pictures serving to awaken deeper and stronger feeling and emotion concerning the object of your desire, and tending toward awakening a stronger degree of affection for that object, which, as a consequence, heightens the flame of desire and thus produces a greater pressure of the steam of will. These suggestive ideas and mental pictures should tempt the appetite of the desire by presenting to it pictures and suggestions of the satisfaction and content, pleasure and joy, which will follow the achievements or attainment of the objects of the desire. This principle is elaborated in that book of this series, entitled Desire Power, in which are also given suggestions and methods designed to aid the working out of the principle. Deliberative Will. You are now asked to consider that phase of will power known as the stage of deliberative will. Deliberation is defined as the act of deliberating or weighing in the mind. In the stage of deliberation you weigh with more or less care the general or special alternative courses of action presenting themselves to the will. Each of the alternative courses possesses certain points of attraction, and also certain points of repulsion. The attractive points arise from the promise of emotional satisfaction and content, the points of repulsion arise from the threat of emotional dissatisfaction and discontent. These opposing points are to be balanced one against the other, to the end that the stage of determination and the resulting stage of voluntary action may be reached, and the processes of will thereby completed. You probably have been accustomed to regard the process of deliberation as one concerned solely with intellectual activity. You probably have imagined that when you deliberate concerning alternative courses of action you approach the matter in the spirit of cold reasoning, and that your decision is made wholly from the standpoint of logical judgment. But, as a matter of fact, the part played by your intellect and reason in the deliberation concerning actions, and in the judgments resulting from this, usually is merely the part of the searcher after facts relating to 1. The direction and means whereby the greatest emotional satisfaction and content may be secured, and 2. The probable results of the action along the lines of either of the two alternative courses, the said results always being measured by their probable effect upon your state of emotional satisfaction and content. In short, your reason is employed to search the records of experience in order to discover and uncover the associations and relations of each of the two alternative courses of action, to the end that you may have the fullest possible information concerning the probable ultimate emotional value of each action, and also to discover and recommend to the will the most effective methods whereby you may apply either of the alternative courses of action if such be accepted. It is true that in the case of persons of trained intellectual powers, of wide experience, well-stocked memory, and active constructive imagination, the intellectual faculties play a far more important part in the processes of deliberation and decision than in the cases in which these processes are performed by persons lacking those mental qualifications and this extended experience. Reason performs valuable services in the direction of holding up to the will the probable results of given alternative courses of action, that the will may more clearly determine the actual emotional value of those courses. It also renders valuable service to the will in the matter of discovering, uncovering, inventing and creating methods whereby the good of the will may best be realized and expressed. In this, and in similar ways, it provides the will with positive and negative motives for choice and action, and thus throws additional weight into the alternative courses upon which deliberation is being had. Reason serves will in this way by placing its forces of memory, imagination and association of ideas at the disposal of will. It also aids will in the direction of furnishing it with the fullest possible information concerning the alternative courses of action under consideration, by telling it all about them, to the best of its ability. This is of the greatest value in the process of deliberation, and very often determines the decision. A course of action, clearly and definitely known, has a very great advantage as a candidate for will action over one not so known. Reason proceeds to aid will in this way with a machine-like coldness, provided that emotion be kept from interfering with the work. Reason has nothing to gain but the satisfaction of its own nature in thought. Reason is very cold-blooded, and tends to proceed with the appalling inexorableness of a machine. It is unfeeling and unmoral, it proceeds logically from premise to conclusion without regard to emotional or moral values. But, at the last, reason acting as an aid to will always is found to be operating merely in the direction of discovering facts concerning the probable emotional value of courses of action under consideration, or else to be planning and deciding upon the most effective methods of expressing and manifesting those desires, or ideas and ideals connected with desires, which have been accepted by the will as containing the promise of emotional value. In short, reason in such cases is concerned merely with the task of uncovering, or in directing the effective expression of, certain courses of action possessing emotional value. This emotional value is always determined by the greater degree of promised emotional satisfaction and content, or the least degree of threatened emotional dissatisfaction and discontent. You should note here, however, the following distinction: the emotional element is directly involved only in deliberation and decision concerning the advisability of performing certain actions or courses of action. It is involved in this way in all questions of to do or not to do, and to all questions of which of these two courses of action shall I choose. It is not involved in this way in cases of purely intellectual effort, or processes of logical reasoning, as, for instance, in the working out of problems of formal logic or mathematics. Neither is it directly involved in cases in which reason is called upon to decide and determine which of certain ideas, plans, methods or courses of procedure will best serve to accomplish certain definite ends and aims. In cases of the latter class, the deliberation and decision concerning the advisability of undertaking certain tasks, or courses of action, have been previously performed along the lines of comparative emotional value, and all that now remains to be deliberated and decided is how best to carry out and execute the designs already adopted, and in what way may best be accomplished the ends already accepted as being emotionally advantageous. The rule, however, applies invariably to all cases in which you experience the conflicting pulls or pushes of I want to do this, in one way, while in another way I do not want to do it, or in cases in which you say to yourself, this seems to be what I want, or to lead to what I want, but I fear that it may bring about complications or related results which I do not want, or where you say to yourself, I want to do this, and I want to do that, but I do not know which I want to do more than the other. In such cases the conflict really is a desire conflict, or an emotional conflict, and not a direct intellectual conflict at all. You may feel inclined to resent this statement, and probably may even indignantly deny its truth. Many persons feel this way when first this fact is presented to them, for most of us like to think that we decide every question of conduct and action from the standpoint of pure logic and cold reason, but we do not do so at all in cases such as we have just mentioned. If you cannot see the truth of this statement, and are inclined to dispute it, you would do well to submit it to the following test of your own reason and experience, and settle it at once and for all, for unless it is settled in your mind you may not be able to enter fully into the spirit of certain points of our instruction which are based upon this particular psychological principle. Here is the test of reason and experience. Apply it to yourself, honestly and in the scientific spirit, and answer it in the same way. Ask yourself the following questions. What are the true reasons governing my decisions concerning alternative courses of action and conduct, or of refraining from any certain action or course of conduct, in which the element of feeling, emotion, affection or desire is involved? Do I, or do I not, consider and decide the question of shall I, or shall I not, or which shall I do or choose, from the standpoint and with the motive of securing the greatest emotional satisfaction and content, or the least emotional dissatisfaction and discontent, the greatest pleasure or the least pain? In answering these questions, you should bear in mind that the pleasure and pain may be immediate and remote, and may be concerned directly with your own personal experience or that of others in whom you are interested or to whom you are connected by the bonds of sympathy or affection. All of these forms of emotional satisfaction and content, or emotional dissatisfaction and discontent, come under the general rule. A careful self-analysis, and a frank, honest report based thereupon, is certain to bring to you the conviction that your deliberations and decisions in cases of this kind, concerning your actions or courses of conduct, invariably are conducted and made upon this basis of the greatest emotional value. The reasons for your actions and courses of conduct are never divorced from your feelings, affections and desires. In fact, in the absence of feeling, affection and desire there could not and would not be any reasons at all for your actions or courses of conduct. The only reason, the only cause and because of your actions, or of your choice of actions, or of your acting at all, is the reason, the cause, and the because arising from the promise of emotional satisfaction and content, or the threat of the opposite results, the probable emotional value, in short, passed upon to some extent by reason. Sometimes it is difficult to trace back the path to the determining feeling, affection or desire of an action or course of conduct, so remote or so complex such may be at times, but the influence of the feeling, the affection or the desire is always there, animating and inspiring the action or course of conduct, for, otherwise, there would and could be no reason, cause, or because, at all for your conduct or action, and, consequently, no answer to the question, why, asked concerning such action or conduct. In this connection you should remember that we include habit, resulting from antecedent actions based upon emotional content. Among the emotional motives, you know that it is more comfortable to act according to habit than contrary thereto, and comfortable implies feeling and desire. Before conative will is transformed into active will, there must occur a greater or less degree of mental activity in the stage of deliberation. Conative will becomes transformed into active will only in response to some idea or object calling it forth into expression and manifestation. There are usually several alternative ideas or objects presented to the will for decision and choice, or at least there is the alternative of to do or not to do. Here, deliberative will, assisted by intellect, weighs and appraises these conflicting alternatives. The process of deliberation may be extended over a considerable period of time, or else it may be almost instantaneous, but it is always performed. Pleasure and pain, agreeable or disagreeable mental states, are the precedents of all definite activities of will. Action is found always to proceed toward the most agreeable, and away from the most disagreeable mental state. The will is always interested, never disinterested, in its actions. It always moves to gain some end, to acquire something which to it seems good. Life is largely a matter of securing the agreeable and escaping the disagreeable. But it must not be forgotten that by the shifting of the mental point of view our emotional feelings often change from the agreeable to the disagreeable, and vice versa. Sometimes there is a violent shifting from one pole to the other of our emotional nature. Such changes arise from the discovery of new attributes in the objects and ideas presenting themselves for deliberation, decision and determination. Thus, while feeling, affection and desire are the motives for all will actions, the other mental faculties play an important part by presenting to them the ideas and mental images which tend to influence and direct the emotional faculties, and thus have an important influence on will itself. Finding your definite purposes. We shall now illustrate to you the process of deliberative will by an appeal to your own personal experience. While doing this you will also be obtaining some practical exercise along the lines of efficient deliberative will work and activity. In the following illustrations and examples, the particular principles under consideration will be brought out, and at the same time you will take several important steps in the direction of actual practice and training of your willpower. Instead of illustrating the principles in question by introducing abstract and impersonal examples or instances, we shall employ illustrations and examples from your own personal experiences, so that in examining these illustrative examples you will at the same time be actually exercising the mental faculties which furnish them. Begin by asking yourself the following question: for what purpose do I wish to develop and train my willpower, and to manifest it in action? In what direction do I wish to apply and employ it when I have acquired it? What is the chief end which I seek to accomplish and to attain through the possession and manifestation of developed and trained willpower? Upon your answers to these questions must depend the character of the special instruction and information to be obtained by you from the study of this book. Think well over these questions, ponder them carefully and answer them fully, frankly and honestly to yourself. You will do well to commit your answers to writing for future reference. To think with pencil and paper is a very helpful method and one advised in this course of instruction. The following suggestions and advice should materially aid you in this task of discovering and uncovering your definite purposes toward the attainment and achievement of which you seek to develop and train your willpower. If you are like most persons who undertake this task of determination of their definite purposes, which they seek to attain and achieve by means of their willpower, you will find yourself perplexed to furnish the correct answers to the questions just propounded to you, and which you are expected to answer as fully as possible. You, like many others, probably have not as yet found yourself in this important matter. That is to say, you have not as yet discovered and uncovered your definite purposes in life. If this be so, then this instruction has reached you at the right time, because, until you discover and uncover your definite purposes, you cannot expect to employ efficiently even that degree of willpower which you have already developed, not to speak of that additional degree which you hope to attain. Most persons in this stage, and this probably includes yourself, find themselves filled with merely a vague and general, though perhaps quite strong, inclination and tendency to push forward into action, thereby to attain and achieve that which will be good to them and for them. They feel the general outward pressure of conative will, but they do not as yet know in just what direction to exert that inner power. This condition is all right so far as it goes, but it does not go far enough. The sense of willpower is there, but willpower without definite purpose is inefficient and useless. There is needed here a strong, definite, positive, purposive direction for the conative will. We shall now present to you the methods whereby this needed element may be supplied. Dominant desires. In the first place, you should discover your dominant desires, i.e., the strongest and most insistent desires which abide within your mental and emotional being. It is no easy matter to discover and uncover your dominant desires without some instruction concerning the process. You will find that your mental and emotional being is filled with a multitude of desires, great and small, transient and permanent, many of which oppose and interfere with others. There is required of you a determined and careful weighing and measuring of your desires, the element of depth and width, as well as of weight, being taken into the calculation. There must be a weeding of the desire garden, a cutting away of the dead wood of the tree of desire, a test of strength and vitality between opposing sets of desires, resulting in the survival of the fittest. In that book of this series entitled Desire Power, we have gone into detail and into an extended consideration of this process of the discovery of the dominant desires, to which you are referred if you are especially interested in the subject. The detailed and extended consideration of this special feature cannot be repeated in this book, and is confined to that book dealing with the special subject of desire power. The following condensed synopsis, however, will serve to give you the essence and substance of the general principle involved. 1. The regions of the mind are explored for the purpose of bringing to light the various feelings, emotions, affections, longings and desires which compose your emotional nature. These, as they are brought to light, are carefully noted on a written list. 2. Then begins the process of elimination as follows: a. The weaker and less insistent desires, and those plainly of a transient, passing nature, are struck from the list, leaving there only the stronger and more permanent ones. b. The list is then again carefully scrutinized, those desires which stand out by reason of their superior power are retained, the remainder being eliminated. c. The process is continued along these lines of critical selection, until further elimination is deemed inadvisable for fear of cutting away live wood. 3. Then the surviving desires are arranged into classes, and these classes are subjected to competition with each other, the stronger and more permanent being retained, while the weaker and less permanent are discarded. 4. Then the surviving sets of desires are compared carefully for the purpose of discovering antagonism and opposition, i.e., the qualities of contradiction which render coordination and harmonious cooperation impossible, and which tend to pull the will in two opposite directions and thus to bring it to a standstill or dead center. 5. The opposing and contradictory sets of qualities must be pitted in competition against each other, for one or the other must be discarded from the field of the will. Each must be viewed from every possible mental and emotional angle, and subjected to the most rigid tests. The final result will reveal the stronger of each opposing and contradictory sets of qualities, those which have won in the struggle for existence, and which represent the survival of the fittest. The survivors in this process of selection and elimination will represent the strongest and most deeply rooted desires of the individual, and will constitute his dominant desires. These dominant desires represent his strongest and most enduring affections, based upon his most vigorous, hearty, and sturdy feelings, and rising to the stage of conative will in the form of insistent desire. They represent that which one wants hard enough, wants so insistently as to render him willing to pay the price of its attainment. Energizing ideas. But desire is not the only element involved in deliberative will. In fact, it may be said that every great department of mental activity is involved therein. The presence of ideas and ideals is necessary in the process of deliberation. Action is influenced by representative ideas of objects and things of the outside world. Each clear and strong idea opens a path to possible action, and, therefore, constitutes an element of the deliberative process. Memory and imagination are also called into play with great effect in the processes of deliberative will. Professor Halleck says, "The greater variety of ideas a man has, the more numerous are the courses of action open to him." If an intelligent physician has an idea of 25 different methods of treating rheumatism, he may vary his treatment accordingly, and may succeed where a less skilled doctor would fail. If a businessman has a dozen ideas to fit a given emergency, he may act in any one of these directions. If he has but one idea, he can act but in one direction. Idea must proceed to open a path for intelligent action. Before Columbus sailed, he had an idea of land beyond the seas. Even a plumber must have an idea of how to make a short cut for his pipe, before he can do it. The same well-known teacher said, "Deliberation is a process of both intellect and will, of intellect to represent ideas and compare them, and of will to hold the ideas before the attention or to dismiss them and make room for others." In the deliberative process, the whole man makes himself felt, all his past experiences count. In impulsive action, the momentary state triumphs. Let us take a rational human action and see how much deliberation may be involved in it. I wish to leave the city during the heated term. Before I act, I not only have the desire to go, but I must know where to go. I find out the location, the merits and the defects of a number of summer resorts. Then I proceed to deliberate. A has surf bathing, B is on a mountain and has fine tonic air, C is nearby and some of my friends are going there, but the mosquitoes are annoying and will not allow one to take a walk with any comfort, D has fine air and no mosquitoes, but the place is too fashionable and too much given to dress, E suits for all reasons, save that it is too expensive, F would answer but it is too far off. I then take into my deliberations the possibility of staying all summer in the city. 3 hot days come. The nights are so warm that one cannot sleep. I then continue my deliberations about the summer resorts. Will is necessarily present in its most important aspect in every act of deliberation. I balance one idea against another. By willpower I turn my attention undivided upon one idea, then I dismiss it, and turn my attention to another. I consider the surf bathing of A, the mountain air of B, the annoyance at C, the fashion at D, the expense at E, the distance to F. The intellectual faculties are called into play in the processes of deliberative will in the way pictured in the above illustration concerning the matter of choice of summer resorts. It produces from the region of imagination and memory many facts bearing upon each of the alternative courses of action. It brings up the associated and related facts which add to or detract from the merits of the alternative. It also serves to expose the false nature of some of the alternative courses of action, and to add to the validity of others. It acts in the direction of choosing and adapting means to given ends, and it establishes the logical relation of cause and effect between different things. Before one can know what he wants, he must understand the true nature of the alternative wants, he must know the relations and consequences, the associations and the results, of particular courses of action. The person who wishes to know intelligently just what he wants, and just what course of general action will bring to him the greatest ultimate content and satisfaction, must employ his reasoning faculties in addition to exploring his emotional nature. He must use head as well as heart. He must learn how to observe and examine things, how to obtain correct perceptions, how to form logical judgments, how to use his powers of imagination and memory in the task. As Halleck has said, in the deliberative process, the whole man makes himself felt. The subject of deliberative will blends into and harmonizes with that of determinative will in many particulars. Determination is the final step or stage of deliberation, and, at the same time, the first step or stage of voluntary action. With this fact in mind, let us now proceed to the consideration of determinative will, to which subject the following section of this book is devoted. Determinative will. The stage of determination is the fourth stage of the will process. Determination is defined as follows: 1. The act of terminating or bringing to an end, the state of decision; also, 2. Strength and firmness of mind, firm resolve or resolution and absolute direction to a certain end. The first definition indicates the termination or ending of the process of deliberation, the decision resulting from the process of deliberation. The second definition indicates the beginning of a new process, i.e., the process of impulsion toward voluntary action, and the direction of that impulse. In the following consideration of determinative will you will see that both of these stages are manifested by will passing through the stage of determination. You must remember, here, that in studying this subject you are employing a method which may be stated as finding your definite purposes, and which is represented by the effort to answer the following questions which you have propounded to yourself. For what purpose do I wish to develop and train my willpower, and to manifest it in action? In what direction do I wish to apply and employ it when I have acquired it? What is the chief end which I seek to accomplish and to attain through the possession of developed and trained willpower? You have subjected these questions to the test of the deliberative will, and are now presenting them to the determinative will for decision, and for subsequent positive action upon that decision. The process of deliberation cannot be arrived at the present time in absence of sufficient evidence to warrant an intelligent conclusion. Professor Halleck illustrates the act of decision following his deliberation concerning the summer resort, previously quoted, as follows: with reference to the summer resort, deliberation does not end the voluntary process, the act of will is yet incomplete. Something more is necessary than 1. A desire to go, and 2. Deliberation about a large number of resorts. My next voluntary step is to choose among the many resorts concerning which I have been deliberating, and to decide to go to one. G satisfies my reason, for the place has sailing and fishing, good walks, few mosquitoes and moderate charges. I then cut short the deliberation and decide to go to G. Decision is a termination of the process of deliberation. The illustration just quoted, however, ends with the performance of the first stage or phase of determinative will, i.e., the stage in which the deliberation is brought to an end, and the decision made. Here the individual says, I have decided to go to G, I shall go to G. He has made up his mind to go to G, but he has not as yet actually set into operation the will machinery of action upon that decision. He must also come to the point in which he can and will truthfully say, I have now the definite purpose of going to G, I intend to go there, and I now begin to exert my willpower to that end. This last represents the second phase or stage of determinative will. In consideration of this particular phase of the activities of the will, we find present the typical examples of the distinction between the strong, healthy will, on the one hand, and the weak, flabby will, on the other hand. The individuals composing the first class make up their minds firmly and positively, and then release their impulsive and directive powers toward the related will action. The individuals composing the second class, on the contrary, find it most difficult, 1. To make up their minds, 2. To keep their minds made up, and 3. To exert their impulsive and directive powers into manifestation and action. The decision which terminates the process of deliberation is distinctly an act of will, and the sense of voluntary strain and effort is clearly perceptible in the process. Many find decision to be the hardest part of the whole voluntary process. Such persons frequently find it almost impossible to make up their minds, to decide and determine their course of action. They have a decided tendency to allow others to make up their minds for them. Another large class is composed of persons who are in the habit of making up their minds in a flash, without due deliberation or exercise of judgment. Such persons frequently find themselves in trouble as the result of their hasty judgments, and often are required to expend considerable time and energy in their endeavors to rectify matters or to escape from the consequences of their ill-considered decisions. The course of the wise person lies in the direction of escaping these two undesirable extremes, and in maintaining the golden mean between them. Many persons who recognize in themselves the tendency to waver in making decisions, and to escape so far as possible the real act of decision and determination, have vainly sought the cure for their trouble in the conventional advice and platitudinous instruction concerning the use of the will in such cases. These persons have felt intuitively that there must be some scientific method, based upon sound psychological principles, which would enable them to overcome their handicap, and serve to establish a new habit of making decisions and determinations. Such intuition is well grounded in fact, for such a method does exist and will accomplish its object. In the following several pages we shall present it to your attention. In most cases in which it is found difficult to arrive at a decision following the process of deliberation, the trouble will be discovered to lie in the fact that the emotional intellectual value of the conflicting alternatives are too nearly alike to admit of an easy decision. When the full emotional intellectual value of the alternatives is clearly perceived, then the decision is easy in most cases, for the weight is clearly on one side. In most cases the choice is made almost automatically. It is axiomatic that the choice between the alternatives is quick and easy in the direct degree that their respective values are clearly and definitely known. In some cases, however, even the process of careful deliberation fails to reveal a preponderance of weight on either side, and the discovery of new attributes has served merely to raise both of the alternative courses to a higher plane of interest, without bestowing upon either a greater proportionate weight. In such cases, the person is like the donkey who starved to death because he was unable to decide between two equally attractive haystacks. It is clear that, if determination is to be reached in such cases, some new element must be introduced. The element of fixed standard. This new element to be introduced into the task of determination is known as the element of fixed standard, to which we shall now direct your attention. We ask you to consider carefully the following method designed to apply the principle of this added element, for it contains the secret of the correction of many weaknesses of the will, and the key to the cultivation of prompt, positive and certain decision in determination. The fundamental and essential principle of the fixed standard is expressed as follows: you must establish in your mind a clearly defined, certain and positive fixed standard of will values, based upon an accepted general idea of your summum bonum, or chief good, with relative degrees of goodness or badness on the scale of will values, said relative degrees being determined by the respective nearness or remoteness to the summum bonum or chief good. This summum bonum, or chief good, which constitutes your fixed standard, must be decided upon by yourself. No one else can do the work for you. It must represent your sovereign ideal, your highest conception of general conduct and action, by means of which all special conduct or action is to be measured, weighed or gauged. The term standard is defined as that which is established by authority as a rule for the measure of quantity, quality, extent or value, that which is established as a rule or model, a criterion, a test. In the present case, your fixed standard is the accepted test, rule or measure of will value. Your fixed standard may be modeled upon the character of some great man whom you wish to adopt as a model, or, perhaps upon a composite character made up of the approved and esteemed characteristics of a number of such individuals. Or, again, it may be the idea of some accepted adage, aphorism or rule of conduct, which seems to embody your ideal of behavior and action, as, for instance, the touchstone of positivity frequently referred to in our instruction, which is expressed in the test question, will this make me stronger, better and more efficient? Or, again, it may be some accepted statement of the general principle of ethical conduct and action, as, for instance, the celebrated categorical imperative of Kant, viz., act only on that maxim whereby thou canst at the same time will that it should become a universal law, or in simpler form, act always so that you might wish your action and conduct to become the standard of the action of and conduct of all persons. Other aphorisms of this kind are, respectively, the Golden Rule, do unto others as you would have others do unto you, or the axiom of Grotius, wrong no man, and render unto every man his due. Or, again, you may adopt as your standard the maxim, my every action must contribute to my ultimate success, or the rule that your every action must be in the direction of the betterment of the world, or along the lines of some particular ethical, moral or religious teachings. We have mentioned the above examples and illustrations merely to indicate to you the general principle involved, and not that you must adopt any one of them. You may have some fixed standard of your own which will far better suit your particular purposes. Our purpose here is merely to have you adopt some fixed standard, not any particular one. The touchstone of positivity, so frequently mentioned in this instruction, however, may be adopted by you as a sound, practical basis of conduct and action, for, rightly interpreted and understood, it represents a very high ideal of practical philosophy. Its test question, will this make me stronger, better and more efficient, is based upon the threefold ideal of strength, virtue and efficiency, surely not an unworthy ideal, and not contrary to the categorical imperative or to the Golden Rule, for it could not be objected to as a rule of universal conduct and action, or of justice to others. We offer it as a suggestion, but you are free to reject it in favor of a rule of your own, without impairing in any way whatever the application of the principle or the method now to be explained to you. The adoption of your fixed standard will give you something with which to measure, weigh, or value any and all alternatives of action which are perplexing your determinative will. From it you will build a scale or table of will values, a clearly defined and certain scale with which to measure, weigh, and value the alternative courses of action which are constantly presenting themselves for the decision of determinative will. This scale or table of will values must be established as far as possible before the time of actual choice or decision. It must cover so far as is possible every probable demand upon you for decision, particularly the general principle of choice involved in any special subject likely to come prominently before you. In other words, you must proceed to conduct your deliberation long before the time in which your course of action is likely to arrive, so that when the hour of trial comes you will have your basis of decision and determination already firmly and positively made, and thus be able to announce it without delay, yet backed by the weight of your previous careful consideration. In this way, you really map out or chart in advance the course over which your will shall proceed on its future journeys, and thus escape the danger of the rocks and reefs which wreck the craft of the mariner lacking such chart. In your table of will values you must have numerous degrees or grades of values. At the head of your list must appear your top values, certain principles of action of surpassing value to you, and which must always be dominant. These top values must represent conduct and action operating to secure results and consequences strongly in line with your fixed standard. Thus, if you have adopted the touchstone of positivity, your top values will represent actions and conduct which clearly and positively tend to make you stronger, better, and more efficient. Your top values, whatever they may represent, must never be sacrificed, no matter what may be the temptation. Any course of action which contradicts or negates your top values must be rejected at once. Your top values must have an almost religious significance. You must be so inspired by them that a suggestion of their violation will cause you to become horrified and indignant. These top values must be regarded as something sacred and to be treated with reverence. At the other extreme of the scale there must be bottom values, i.e., certain courses of action which must be viewed with loathing and disgust, and which, under no circumstances whatsoever must be followed by you. You must firmly establish these bottom values, and must keep away from the courses of action and conduct represented by them. There must be no flirting with them, no compromise with them. They must be regarded always as essentially evil and opposed to your real well-being and to your permanent happiness, satisfaction and content. These bottom values must be to you what the devil was to the old-time Orthodox Church people. There must be no compromise with Satan. You must always assume the attitude of, "Get thee behind me, Satan." To these bottom values, in case your fixed standard is the touchstone of positivity, then your bottom values will represent those courses of action and conduct which unquestionably will tend to make you weaker, worse, and less efficient. Between these ever-to-be-sought top values and the ever-to-be-avoided bottom values, there will be a wide range of middle values or neutral values, arranged in their respective places according to their respective degrees of likeness and unlikeness, nearness and remoteness, to the values situated at the two respective poles of the scale. Your judgment will dictate the proper place on the scale for each and every kind of value, and you will find it a very interesting task to place and arrange these possible courses of conduct and action upon your scale. You will do well to use pencil and paper here, and actually to construct a black and white scale or diagram of this kind. The main fact to be remembered, the one vital fact upon which the value of the whole system depends, is that the arrangement must be committed to memory so that it may be recalled easily at any time. Each grade, class or subclass, on the scale must have its own definite and particular place, so that it may always be found when looked for, and each class must be definitely set off and apart from the one above it and the one below it on the scale. The more definite and positive your classification, the greater the degree of effective availability has your scale. The ideal scale is that one by which you may immediately determine which of any two alternative courses of action possesses the greater will value for you. The nearer to this ideal you can come, the more effective will become your table of will values. A little active use of your imagination at this point will convince you of the wonderful service that a table of this kind will render to you. Think of being able to have a table of will values as all-inclusive and as infallible as is the multiplication table. You will find that it is as great an improvement upon the ordinary hit or miss method as the use of the multiplication table is an improvement upon counting off on your fingers. If you have gone properly about the work of building your table of will values, you will find that in the end your top values will represent a. Your strongest feelings, emotions, affections and desires, b. Subjected to the careful scrutiny, analysis, synthesis and final judgment of your reasoning faculties, and c. Tested by your highest ethical or moral principles and standards. In establishing your table of will values, your physical, mental, moral and spiritual natures have participated. It represents the essence of your whole nature and character. When you find yourself confronted with two or more perplexing alternatives calling for decision and determination, you have but to apply to each of the alternative courses the following test questions. What place on my table of will values has this proposed course? How closely does it resemble, harmonize with and conform to my top values? How far is it away from my bottom values? The answer will give the proper value to you of each of the two alternatives, immediately and directly. Your decision and determination will speedily follow. Moreover, by this method the will is trained into the habit of decision and determination along the lines of the highest will values. However, you must remember that your table of will values may be added to, improved, modified and subjected to the process of evolutionary development, as your experience broadens and widens your intellectual, emotional and moral horizon. The table of will values of the youth, while properly to be employed by him at the time, cannot properly be held to govern the man of matured experience. As with everything else in nature, the law of evolution should govern this table of will values. The system is no rigid, inflexible code which when once formed and adopted can never afterward be improved and enlarged. On the contrary, the intelligent, progressive man will see to it that his table of will values keeps pace with his ever-advancing knowledge and experience. But, Here, you should note two very important points of advice and caution concerning proper changes in your table of will values, viz. 1. Never change or modify your scale of will values when under the influence of temptation, or upon the suggestion of others interested in your decision, or when under the fire of opposition. 2. While your scale of will values remains unmodified and unimpaired concerning any decision or choice of a course of action, you should live up to it implicitly and positively. It must be strictly adhered to until modified in the proper manner, and under the proper circumstances. i.e., free from outside urge or temptation, suggestion or opposition. The following additional advice concerning these points doubtless will be of assistance to you. 1. As we have said above, your table of will values should never be changed or modified while you are under fire either of temptation, direct opposition, or the suggestions of others. All your changes, modifications, and evolutionary developments in your table of will values should be made by you when you are apart from, and free from, the direct influences just referred to. This because when under the direct influence of these psychological forces your judgment is not always perfectly clear, and your emotional nature often is agitated. Here is the rule: the changes and modifications, those amendments to your constitution of will, should be made only under the same, or similar, circumstances, and with the same care, consideration, deliberation and subjection to tests, which were involved when you made the decisions leading to the original formation of your table of will values. Your constitution of will. By observing this rule you will keep your feet on solid rock, and will escape many dangers and unpleasant experiences. 2. Again, we have told you that you should stand by and live up to your existing table of will values at all times. So long as your scale remains unmodified and unimpaired concerning any particular course of action, you should regard it as absolutely binding upon your will and judgment at that time. Any other course would lead you into that state of instability and uncertainty, of indecision and lack of determination, which is the mark of the weak and flabby will. Your table of will values represents the best that is in you, the best in the whole of your nature, at any given time, and, consequently, in the long run it will be found to be by far the safest and the sanest guide to your actions and decisions. It represents you, yourself, in your state of calm and careful knowledge and decision, as contrasted with you, yourself, under the disturbing influences which shake your judgment and disturb the waters of your emotions. It represents the judgment of Philip sober, as contrasted with that of Philip drunk. Note this distinction, however: though the stubborn, bigoted man stands by his table of will values, he does not let the law of evolution play upon the same. He admits no new ideas, no new viewpoints, no new facts arising from changed circumstances. The man of true firmness and stability of will, however, while likewise standing firmly by his table of will values, nevertheless always is willing and anxious to keep up with the times in his table of values, and he is always working to improve its quality under the proper conditions. While both men stand by their table of will values as they exist at the time on all occasions, there is a difference as wide as the distance between the poles manifested in their respective methods. In one case the code is petrified and rigid, while in the other it is flexible, alive, and subject to improvement under the proper conditions. The man who really is firm is fixed in purpose, but he is willing to change his position when his purpose is thereby served. The stubborn man, however, is fixed only in position. He sticks to his position even if his purpose is imperiled and destroyed thereby. Note the distinction. The above stated two cautionary rules will be found to work out well in practice, in the long run, the few exceptions, or apparent exceptions, serving principally to emphasize the general rule. There are but very few cases in which these rules will not prove to be the formulae of the wisest and sanest action and conduct. If you have exercised due care in building up your table of will values, the exceptions to these rules will prove to be remarkably small, so small, in fact, that they may be said not to count in the sum total of your experiences. This system based upon the table of will values is not nearly so arbitrary as it may seem at first glance. Inasmuch as your table of will values has been built carefully, and as carefully passed upon in final decision, it represents the best in your emotional being, your intellectual being, your moral being. This being so, it follows that in living up to these highest reports of your whole being, and in avoiding that which is reported by your whole being as being low and unworthy, you are living up to that which is of the greatest real and permanent value to you, you are being true to yourself, and, according to good authority, in doing this you are also being true to all other men. Establishing a conscience of will values. If you proceed with proper earnestness and determination in the work of building up and establishing your table of will values based upon your chosen fixed standard, and then proceed to apply the standards of that table honestly and conscientiously, then, before long you will find that you have established what may be called a conscience of will values in your subconscious mental being. This new conscience will grow strong, and will soon manifest itself as strenuously and as efficiently as does the more familiar ordinary, moral conscience, with which all of us are more or less familiar. The newly awakened conscience of will values, existing in the subconscious regions of your being, will sound the alarm bell when you are in danger of violating the principles of your fixed standard and of failing to observe your top values. It will render you uncomfortable when you are not living up to the requirements of your standards. It will impart the feeling of a warm glow of satisfaction when you comply with the principle. The man in whom this conscience of will values has been awakened is blessed. He will have a something within, which will keep his feet on the right path, and which will warn him from straying into the bypaths which beset the road of attainment. And thrice blessed is he who, having this conscience, acquires the habit of steadfastly heeding its warnings and obeying its orders. This section of this book should be studied in connection with the one immediately preceding it, and the one immediately following it, for the three sections are closely related in subject matter, and the instruction in each blends very closely with that in the two others. In the present section we have considered merely the first phase of the determinative will, i.e., the phase of decision or making up your mind. The consideration of the second phase, i.e., the phase of firm resolve or resolution, or absolute direction to a certain end, will be carried over to the section immediately following the present one, i.e., the section dealing with voluntary action. The reason for such division of the subject, and such blending of the two phases of will action, will become more apparent to you as we proceed.